the bride who arrived for a rancher who never wrote her name. When Emma Whitaker stepped down from the eastbound train in Mercy Ridge, Wyoming, she expected to see her future husband waiting with his hat in his hands. Instead, she found only dust, staring faces, and a boy holding a letter with her name written on it in a stranger's hand. The train gave one last breath of steam behind her. Smoke rolled over the platform and wrapped around her travel dress, which was already gray at the hem from 3 days of sitting near open windows and coal ash. Emma held her brown carpetbag with both hands. Inside it were 2 dresses, a folded ticket tucked in one glove, a needle case, a little tin of hairpins, and the letter that had pulled her across half the country. Miss Emma Whitaker, if you are still willing to come west, I will meet you at the Mercy Ridge station on the 17th of September. I have a ranch, a clean name, and a need for a wife who is not afraid of quiet country. I cannot promise fine words, but I can promise a roof, honest work, and respect. Nathaniel Cross. She had read those lines so many times the paper had gone soft at the folds. Now the 17th of September had come, and no Nathaniel Cross stood waiting. A woman in a blue bonnet looked Emma over from the porch of the depot office. 2 men near the freight wagon stopped loading sacks of flour just to stare. A little girl with a ribbon in her hair whispered something to her mother, and the mother pulled her close, as if Emma had brought trouble in her carpetbag. The boy on the platform could not have been more than 12. He wore trousers too short at the ankles and a hat too large for his head. He cleared his throat and held out the envelope. "Are you Miss Whitaker?" Emma's heart lifted, then fell. "I am. This was left for you. By Mr. Cross." The boy shifted his feet. "By Miss Hattie Bell. She runs the boarding house." Emma took the envelope. Her fingers were stiff from the ride, but not from the cold. Fear had a way of making a woman's hands forget how to move. The envelope was not sealed. It had been folded once and tucked shut. "Miss Whitaker. Come to Bell House before asking questions in the street. Folks here talk faster than trains move. Hattie Bell." Emma looked from the note to the town. Mercy Ridge sat beneath a long wall of brown hills and dark pine. The main street was little more than packed dirt, cut by wagon wheels and hoofprints. A blacksmith's hammer rang from the far end. A church bell hung quiet in a white steeple. Beyond the stores and roofs, the land opened wide and rough, all golden grass and shadowed ridges. It was beautiful in a hard way. It looked like a place that could save a person or swallow her whole. "Where is Bell House?" Emma asked. The boy pointed across the street. "Yellow porch, but you best be careful." Emma met his eyes. "Of what?" He swallowed. "Of Mr. Cross." Before she could ask more, he ran off, boots kicking dust. Emma stood alone on the platform while the train began to move behind her. For one wild moment, she nearly turned back. She pictured climbing aboard, finding any seat, and riding east until the land became familiar again. But familiar did not mean safe. Back in Ohio, there was no work left for a woman whose employer had died owing wages. There was no room in her aunt's house after her uncle made it clear charity had limits. There was no future in sewing hymns by candlelight for women who spoke kindly in church but paid late and smiled less. Emma had not come west because she was foolish. She had come because the letter had sounded honest. A roof, work, respect, not love. She had not dared ask for that. She crossed the street with her carpetbag pressed close. Dust tugged at her skirt. Her boots struck the boards of the boarding house porch, and before she could knock, the door opened. A small woman with silver hair and sharp brown eyes looked her up and down. "You are Emma Whitaker." "Yes, ma'am." "I am Hattie Bell." The woman stepped aside. "Come in before this town chews you for breakfast." The inside of Bell House smelled of coffee, starch, and cinnamon. A lantern hung near the door, though it was still afternoon. Its flame turned low but steady. The small kindness of that light nearly undid Emma. After so many strange stations and cold benches, it felt like someone had remembered that travelers arrived tired. Hattie led her into a sitting room where lace curtains trembled in the open window. "Sit." Emma sat on the edge of a horsehair chair. Hattie poured coffee without asking. Nathaniel Cross is not coming to the station. Emma's throat tightened. Has something happened to him? That depends who you ask. Mrs. Bell, I came a long way. Please speak plainly. Hattie's face softened a little. Plainly, then, Nathaniel Cross says he did not send for a bride. The words struck with such quiet force that Emma almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the mind sometimes reached for nonsense when truth was too cruel. That cannot be right. I am sorry. Emma pulled the creased letter from her glove and held it out. This is his name. Hattie took it, read it, and sighed through her nose. That is his name, but not his hand. Emma stared at the paper. Her heartbeat sounded loud in her ears. Then who wrote it? I have my guesses. Hattie folded the letter carefully, almost with respect. But guesses can ruin folks in a town this small. Emma rose too quickly. I need to see him. Child, you have been on the road for days. I did not cross this much land to hide behind curtains. A faint smile touched Hattie's mouth. No, I suppose you did not. They found Nathaniel Cross at the livery stable, tightening a girth on a tall bay horse. Emma knew him before Hattie spoke his name. He was broad-shouldered and still as fenced timber, with dark hair under a worn black hat and a face browned by sun and wind. He was not old, perhaps 35, but sorrow had left marks around his eyes. A faded scar cut through one brow. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow, and his hands were rough from work. A little boy stood near the stall door, maybe 6 years old, holding a wooden horse with one broken leg. He watched Emma with open wonder. Nathaniel turned when the stable went quiet. Hattie spoke first. Nate. His gaze moved from Hattie to Emma, then to the carpetbag in her hand. Something guarded came over his face. Emma lifted her chin. Mr. Cross. He removed his hat before answering. The gesture was slow, almost reluctant but respectful. Yes, ma'am. My name is Emma Whitaker. The boy's eyes widened. Nathaniel went very still. Emma stepped closer and held out the letter. You sent this. He did not take it. No, ma'am, he said quietly. I did not. The words were the same as Hattie's, but from him they hurt worse. Emma felt every eye in the livery turn toward her. The stable hand stopped brushing a mare. A man near the door pretended not to listen and failed badly. Her face warmed, but she refused to look down. This letter gave your name. It promised marriage. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Then someone used my name without leave. The little boy moved closer to his father's side. Nathaniel placed one hand lightly on the child's shoulder, not looking away from Emma. I am sorry for your trouble, he said. Truly, but I did not send for you. The apology was decent. That made it worse. Emma had prepared herself for a hard man. She had prepared herself for an ugly cabin, cold mornings, and a marriage built more on need than affection. She had not prepared herself to become a public mistake. Hattie stepped forward. Nate, she has nowhere to go tonight. I did not say she did. Emma heard pity in that, and pity cut deep. I am not asking charity from a man who does not want me, she said. Nathaniel's eyes changed at the word charity, not anger, pain. I did not mean it that way. Then how did you mean it? For a moment only the horses moved, stamping and breathing in the straw. Nathaniel looked at the letter again. This time he took it. His fingers brushed hers, warm and calloused. He read the lines once, then again. On the second reading his face lost color. What is it? Hattie asked. Nathaniel did not answer, his eyes fixed on the last line where his name had been signed. The little boy tugged his sleeve. Pa. Nathaniel folded the letter with care, but his hand was tight around it. Where did you get this? He asked Emma, from a marriage agency in Cincinnati. Who gave you my name? A woman there, Mrs. Larkin. At that name Hattie drew in a small breath. Nathaniel heard it. Emma saw him hear it. What? Emma asked. No one answered at first. Outside, a gust of wind pushed dust across the open stable door. It curled around Emma's boots like smoke. Nathaniel looked toward the street, then back at her. Miss Whitaker, he said, and his voice had changed. It was lower now, weighed down by something he did not want to say. "You should stay at Bell House tonight. Lock your door." Emma's fingers tightened on her carpet bag. "Why?" His eyes went briefly to the little boy, then away. "Because whoever sent you here did not do it for your happiness." Emma felt the whole town watching from beyond the stable door. Nathaniel put his hat back on, but not before she saw the worry in his face. "And before morning," he said, "they may know you arrived." Emma slept little that night. Bell House was cleaner and kinder than any place she had stayed on the long road west, but kindness could not still the thoughts turning inside her. Hattie had given her a small room at the top of the stairs with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a quilt faded from red to soft rose. A lantern burned on the little table beside the bed, its flame turned low. Emma had meant to put it out, but after Nathaniel Cross told her to lock her door, darkness felt too much like surrender. She sat on the edge of the bed in her travel dress long after the town had gone quiet. Dust still clung to the hem. Her gloves lay beside her, one finger curled around the folded train ticket as if even the glove feared losing proof that she had arrived by choice. The letter lay open on the quilt. She traced Nathaniel's name without touching the ink. Who had written it, and why? Outside her window, Mercy Ridge breathed in small night sounds. A horse stamped in the livery. A loose sign creaked over some shop down the street. Somewhere a man laughed, then another voice hushed him. The town was not asleep. It was pretending. Emma rose and crossed to the window. Across the street, the livery stood black against the moonlit dust. One lantern burned inside. A man moved past the open doorway. Nathaniel. Even at a distance, she knew him by the shape of his shoulders. He was carrying a saddle, but he paused halfway across the stable floor and turned his face toward Bell House. Emma stepped back before he could see her watching. Her heart behaved foolishly, beating quick against her ribs. She was angry with him. She had every right to be. Yet she could not forget that he had removed his hat before speaking to her. She could not forget how carefully he had folded the false letter, or how his hand had rested on his boy's shoulder, gentle as a prayer. Men showed their true nature in small movements, her mother used to say. Then again, men also knew how to perform gentleness when it served them. Emma shut the curtain. She had learned caution long before Mercy Ridge. At dawn, the smell of coffee woke her. For one confused breath, she thought she was back in Aunt Ruth's spare room in Cincinnati, listening for the sharp knock that meant she had overslept and would be reminded of every biscuit she had eaten. Then she saw the rose quilt, the trunk against the wall, her carpetbag by the door, the west, the false groom, the warning. Emma washed her face in cold water, smoothed her dark hair into a plain knot, and put on her second-best dress. It was brown wool with a high collar and neat cuffs she had mended twice. Not pretty, but respectable. Respectability mattered most when strangers were hunting for reasons to deny it. Downstairs, Hattie was setting plates on a long dining table. 3 boarders sat already. A freckled schoolteacher with tired eyes, a traveling drummer with a waxed mustache, and an old man who seemed to be made mostly of bones and suspicion. All 3 went silent when Emma entered. Hattie did not. "Sit there by the window. Coffee." "Yes, thank you." Emma sat straight-backed. The schoolteacher gave her a shy nod. The drummer stared too long, then looked down when Hattie rapped a spoon against the coffee pot. "I charge extra for gawking," Hattie said. The old man coughed into his napkin. Emma almost smiled. Breakfast was biscuits, fried potatoes, and ham sliced thin enough to see light through. Emma was hungrier than she wished to admit, but she ate slowly. A woman alone learned not to look needy. The front door opened before the meal was done. Nathaniel Cross stepped in with his hat in his hand. The dining room changed at once. The drummer sat taller. The schoolteacher looked at her plate. Hattie turned from the stove, one hand on her hip. "You come for breakfast or trouble?" Hattie asked. "Neither." Nathaniel's gaze found Emma. "Miss Whitaker, may I speak with you?" Emma placed her fork beside her plate. "Here." He glanced at the boarders. "Private would be better." Hattie pointed toward the back porch. "Doors open. I will be near enough to hear shouting." Nathaniel's mouth twitched, but not enough to become a smile. Much obliged. Emma followed him through the kitchen and out onto the porch. Morning lay pale over Mercy Ridge. The mountains beyond town were washed in blue shadow, and frost silvered the weeds near the steps. A brown horse tied to the rail lifted its head and watched her with soft black eyes. Nathaniel stood at the far end of the porch, leaving a proper space between them. "I owe you more plain speech than I gave yesterday," he said. Emma folded her hands. "Yes, you do." He accepted that with a nod. "I never wrote to any marriage agency. I never asked for a bride. My wife, Abigail, passed near 4 years ago. Since then, women in this town have had opinions about what I should do with my life and my son." "Your son is named Daniel." The name softened something in him, only for a second, but Emma saw it. "He is 6, Nathaniel continued. "He remembers his mother in pieces, her blue shawl, her singing voice, the way she put honey on his cornbread. I have not wanted to bring another woman into his life just because the house is quiet." Emma looked toward the livery. "Then why would someone send for me?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Because my sister-in-law believes Daniel needs a mother and I need managing." "Your sister-in-law?" "Beatrice Vale, Abigail's older sister. She owns the dress shop." He looked past Emma toward the street as a wagon rolled by. "She has been after me to marry again for 2 years. I kept refusing." Emma thought of the name Mrs. Larkin from Cincinnati. "Does she know a woman connected to a marriage agency?" "I do not know yet, but Beatrice has cousins in Ohio. She has friends everywhere letters can reach." The first spark of anger warmed Emma's chest. "So she sent for me like ordering cloth." His eyes came back to her. "Maybe." The word was careful, but it hurt all the same. Emma gave a short breath. "And now I am the bolt that arrived in the wrong color." "No," his voice sharpened. "That is not what you are." She looked at him then. Nathaniel seemed almost angry, but not at her. "You are a woman who was wronged," he said. Emma's fingers curled against her skirt. She had not expected the words to strike so deep. From inside came the clatter of Hattie setting down a pan. Emma turned her face toward the yard. Near the steps, Nathaniel's horse stretched its neck and nosed the edge of her sleeve. The small, curious touch surprised her. She laid her fingers on its warm nose before she thought better of it. "What is his name?" she asked. "Juniper." "That is a gentle name for a big horse." "He came with it." Nathaniel's voice lowered. "My wife named him." Emma drew her hand back. There Abigail was, suddenly standing between them, not in flesh but in memory, in a horse's name, in a boy's honeyed cornbread, in a man's refusal to marry again. Emma felt foolish for having imagined even a practical place in his life. "I should leave Mercy Ridge," she said. Nathaniel looked at her quickly. "Where would you go?" "I do not know. Farther west perhaps, or back east." "Do you have money?" She hated that question because it mattered. Enough for a few days, not enough for pride. He winced as if her honesty had found a bruise. "You can stay at Bell House for a week," he said. "I will pay." "No." "Miss Whitaker." "No," she repeated firmer. "I will not be kept out of guilt." "It is not guilt." "Then what is it?" He had no answer ready. The back door opened and Hattie stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. Her sharp eyes moved between them. "Well," she said, "since neither of you knows how to speak without stepping on broken glass, I will speak. Emma needs work. Nate needs someone to sit with Daniel after school and help at the ranch house while he repairs the north fence before winter. That is not marriage. That is wages." Nathaniel frowned. "Hattie." "Do not Hattie me. You told me last week Daniel has been eating beans from a tin because you burned the stew black." Emma looked at him. Nathaniel glanced away. "I was tired," he muttered. Hattie snorted. The stew was tired too by the look of it. Emma should have refused. Every sensible part of her knew it. Going to work in the house of the man she had traveled west to marry would give Mercy Ridge enough gossip to last through Christmas. Yet wages meant time. Time meant choices. and something in Nathaniel's face told her he did not like needing help any more than she liked needing work. "I can cook," Emma said quietly. "I can sew, clean, keep accounts, read aloud, and mend a shirt so the patch does not show. I will not be nursemaid to a child who does not want me, but I will treat him kindly if he treats me the same." Nathaniel studied her, and she had the strange feeling he was seeing her more clearly than before. "Daniel is wary," he said, "not cruel." "So am I," Emma replied. Hattie laughed once under her breath. Nathaniel removed a small leather purse from his coat and set 3 coins on the porch rail. "For the week at Bell House. Paid as advance wages, not charity. You may leave whenever you choose." Emma looked at the coins, then at him. "And if I stay?" "Then tomorrow morning I will take you to the ranch. You can see the work before deciding." There it was. A door opened only a crack. Not marriage, not love, not the life promised in the letter, but a road beneath her feet. Before Emma could answer, a bell rang over the dress shop across the street. A tall woman in a plum-colored gown stepped onto the boardwalk. Her hair was pinned tight, her gloves white as church candles. Even from a distance, Emma saw the woman stop and stare. Nathaniel saw her too. His whole body went still. "That is Beatrice," he said. The woman crossed the street without hurry. People moved aside for her. Her eyes stayed fixed on Emma, and her face wore the calm, pleased look of someone watching a plan unfold. When she reached the porch steps, she smiled. "Miss Whitaker," she said sweetly, "welcome to Mercy Ridge." Emma's stomach tightened. Nathaniel's voice was cold. "Beatrice, what have you done?" Beatrice looked from him to Emma, then down at the coins on the porch rail. Her smile did not falter. "Only what someone should have done long ago," she said. "I brought your bride home." Beatrice Vale stood on the boarding house steps as if she had every right to be there, with her white gloves folded over the rail and her smile shining bright enough to fool a careless person. Emma Whitaker was not careless. She had spent too many years reading faces across sewing counters and dining room tables. She knew the difference between kindness and control. Kindness made room for another person to breathe. Control smiled while closing the door. Nathaniel Cross stepped down from the porch until he stood on the dirt street between Beatrice and Emma. "You had no right," he said. Beatrice's eyes flicked toward the few townspeople pretending not to listen. The blacksmith had stopped hammering. A woman carrying eggs paused outside the mercantile. 2 boys leaned against a rain barrel, wide-eyed with the joy of adult trouble. "Nathaniel," Beatrice said softly, "lower your voice." "I will not." Her smile thinned. "Then you will embarrass yourself." "I did not write to that agency." "No," Beatrice said. "You would have let Daniel grow up in that cheerless house with dust on his mother's piano and cold biscuits on the table." Nathaniel's face hardened. "Do not bring Abigail into this." "Abigail was my sister. She was my wife." Those words struck the air like a gate slamming. Emma stood very still, holding her carpetbag at her side. She should have gone inside. This was family grief, old and sharp. It had nothing to do with her except that someone had used her life as thread in their torn seam. Beatrice turned to Emma. "Miss Whitaker, I am sorry you had to witness this." Emma lifted her chin. "I am sorry I had to live it." For the first time, Beatrice's pleasant face faltered. Hattie Bell gave a low chuckle behind Emma. "Careful, Beatrice. This one has teeth." Beatrice ignored her. "I can explain." "I hope you can," Emma said, "because I left my home after receiving a letter signed with Mr. Cross's name. I spent my savings. I came to a town where strangers already knew more about me than I knew about them. Now I learn I was invited by a woman who never even asked if I wished to be part of her plan." Beatrice's cheeks colored, but she held her ground. "You answered an advertisement for marriage, did you not?" Emma's fingers tightened around the carpetbag handle. "I answered a letter that offered respect." "And you shall have it. Nathaniel is a good man." "That is not yours to offer." A hush fell. Nathaniel looked at Emma then, and something like respect moved through his eyes. Not pity, not worry, respect. It steadied her more than she expected. Beatrice drew herself taller. I did what was best for Daniel. A small voice spoke from behind the livery door. Did you send for her, Aunt B? Everyone turned. Daniel Cross stood half hidden in the shadow of the stable. He held the broken wooden horse against his chest. His eyes were fixed on his aunt, and there was fear in them but also hurt. Beatrice softened at once. Daniel, darling, this is grown talk. You said Pa needed a wife. Nathaniel moved toward him, but Daniel stepped back. You said if a new lady came, Pa would stop being sad. Beatrice closed her eyes for 1 second. Emma felt the whole shape of the thing change. This was not only pride, not only a meddling woman with too much time and ink. There was a child inside it, listening at doors, carrying words too heavy for him. Nathaniel crouched a few feet from his son. Danny. The boy's lower lip trembled, but he did not cry. I never asked for a new ma. I know, but I do not like when the house is quiet. Nathaniel's shoulders fell. Emma looked away. Some sorrows were too private to watch directly. Beatrice started down the steps. You see, he needs a woman's care. He needs truth, Nathaniel said, rising, not tricks. The words reached more than Beatrice. They reached Emma too. Truth. She had wanted a new beginning because Truth had failed to feed her back east. Truth had not paid rent when her employer died and his nephew refused the wages owed. Truth had not stopped her aunt from whispering that a single woman without money attracted misfortune. Truth had not changed the fact that Emma could sew fine seams and keep books, yet still had to beg for steady work. She had folded her courage into a carpetbag and called it hope. Now hope stood in the street wearing another woman's lie. Beatrice faced Nathaniel. You are stubborn because grief suits you. His eyes flashed. She went on, voice shaking now. You wear it like that black coat. You think if you stay lonely enough, it proves you loved my sister. Enough, he said. No, not enough. Abigail is gone. Daniel is here. That ranch is here. And this woman came all this way because something in your life is broken enough that even a stranger could see it. Emma drew a breath. Mrs. Vale. Beatrice looked at her. I am not a hammer for your broken things. The street went silent again. Hattie folded her arms, pleased as Sunday pie. Nathaniel looked down at the false letter in his hand. Slowly, carefully, he held it out to Beatrice. Did you write this? Beatrice stared at the paper. Answer me. I wrote the first letter, she said. Not that one. Nathaniel's brow lowered. What does that mean? I contacted the agency. I described you. I described the ranch. I said you were a widower. And then Mrs. Larkin replied that Miss Whitaker was suitable. I wrote back that she should come. Emma's throat tightened. You wrote as him. Beatrice did not deny it. I did what had to be done. Nathaniel held up the letter. This is not your hand. Beatrice looked confused then, truly confused. Emma saw it before Nathaniel did. That final letter, Emma said slowly. The one with the date, you did not write it. No. Then who did? Before anyone could speak, the traveling drummer from Bell House stepped onto the porch with his valise in hand. Begging pardon, he said, pretending to be innocent and failing at it. A man was asking at the depot this morning if a woman came in on yesterday's train. Dark hair. Brown dress, traveling alone. Emma's skin went cold beneath her collar. Nathaniel turned. What man? Didn't give a name. What did he look like? The drummer swallowed. Gray suit, city hat, fine boots too clean for these streets, had a scar near his mouth. Emma's hand went to the porch rail. Hattie noticed. Emma. The world narrowed to a thin line of sunlight across the boards. A scar near his mouth. Not deep. Not ugly. Just a pale mark where a china plate had shattered in a kitchen argument and flown across a room. Emma had been there. She had swept the pieces while the man laughed at his own bleeding lip and told her she was too jumpy to keep good employment. His name was Victor Harrow. He had served as attorney for her late employer's nephew. He had been the one to say the missing wages were a family matter, not a legal matter. He had smiled while Emma stood with empty pockets and 3 months of labor erased by ink and lies. But why would he follow her west? "Miss Whitaker," Nathaniel said. She tried to answer. Her voice did not come. Hattie took her elbow. "Inside." Emma shook her head. "No, I am all right." She was not all right, but she would not faint in the street for Mercy Ridge to enjoy. Nathaniel stepped closer, still leaving space, but close enough that his shadow cut the sun from her eyes. "Do you know him?" Emma looked at the dust on his boots, then up into his face. She could lie. A small lie might buy a little time, but he had been right. Daniel needed truth. So did she. "I know who it may be," she said. "A lawyer from Ohio." Beatrice's face sharpened. "A lawyer." Emma nodded. "Why would a lawyer come after you?" Beatrice asked. Nathaniel looked at his sister-in-law. "That is not a question for the street." "It is my street as much as yours." "It is her life," he said. The words were quiet, but they settled over Emma like a coat laid around cold shoulders. Her life. Not his problem, not Beatrice's project, not a town's entertainment, hers. The drummer cleared his throat. "I told him she might be at Bell House." Hattie turned on him. "You told him what?" The man lifted his hands. "He paid for information." Hattie's eyes narrowed. "Then take your valise and your loose tongue out of my house before I charge you for both." The drummer hurried down the steps and into the street. Across from them, Daniel walked slowly to Emma. Nathaniel moved as if to stop him, then seemed to think better of it. The boy held up the broken wooden horse. "Can you fix legs?" he asked. Emma blinked. "What?" "My horse." Daniel's voice was small. "Pa says the peg is split. Aunt B says it is ruined." Emma looked at the little toy. One leg dangled by a stubborn thread of wood. "I can try," she said. Daniel studied her face. "Will you stay long enough?" The question struck deeper than he knew. Emma crouched so she could meet his eyes. Dust pressed against her skirt, but she did not care. "I do not know," she told him honestly. "But if your father permits, I can look at it today." Daniel nodded and placed the horse carefully in her hands. Nathaniel watched this without speaking. Beatrice watched too, but her expression had changed. Less certain now, less proud. As if the plan she had made on paper had become flesh and breath and consequences. A bell rang somewhere down the street. At the far end of Mercy Ridge, a man in a gray suit stepped out of the depot office. Emma saw him. So did Nathaniel. The man paused, turned his head, and smiled. Victor Harrow had found her. The carpetbag slipped from Emma's fingers and landed softly in the dust. The broken wooden horse remained in her hands. Nathaniel moved before anyone else did. He did not grab her. He did not command her. He simply stepped beside her, removed his hat again, and spoke in a voice low enough only she could hear. "You do not have to face him alone." Emma stared at the man from Ohio, the man who carried old trouble in polished boots. Then she looked down at Daniel's broken horse. Something in her steadied. She had come west for a promised marriage and found a lie. She had found a child with lonely eyes, a widower afraid of hope, and a town hungry for whispers. But she had also found a choice. "I will not run in daylight," she said. Nathaniel's mouth set in a firm line. "Then we stand." And together, under the watching windows of Mercy Ridge, they waited as the past crossed the street toward them. If you believe a stranger can become home through kindness, stay with this story, because Emma's new beginning is only starting to show its true cost. Victor Harrow crossed Mercy Ridge like he owned the dust under his boots. He wore a gray suit too fine for a town where most men smelled of horse, iron, and tobacco. His coat was brushed clean. His collar was white. His dark hat sat at the right angle, as if he had checked it in a mirror before stepping into the street. A thin scar curved near the corner of his mouth, pale against his smooth face. Emma remembered that scar. She remembered the crash of the plate, the sharp scatter of broken china across a polished floor, and Victor's laugh as he pressed a handkerchief to his bleeding lip. "Careful, Miss Whitaker. A woman with nerves like yours ought not work near valuables." He had said it kindly. That was how he did his worst things. Now he stopped a few paces from the boarding house porch and touched 2 fingers to the brim of his hat. "Miss Whitaker," he said, "I feared the road might have been unkind to you." Emma's hand tightened around Daniel's broken wooden horse. Nathaniel Cross stood beside her, broad and silent. Hattie remained in the doorway with one hand tucked into her apron pocket. Emma did not know what was in that pocket, but from the look on Hattie's face, she hoped Victor behaved himself. Beatrice Vale stood near the steps, pale with worry she was trying to hide. Emma forced herself to meet Victor's eyes. "Mr. Harrow." His smile widened. "So formal after all we endured together in Ohio." "We endured nothing together." A few people had gathered at a safe distance. Mercy Ridge loved a new story, and Emma could almost feel the town leaning forward. Victor looked toward Nathaniel. "You must be Mr. Cross." Nathaniel did not offer his hand. "That depends on why you ask." "I am Victor Harrow, attorney to the Whitcomb estate of Cincinnati." He spoke clearly, making sure every ear nearby could catch the words. "I have come on a matter of property and legal obligation." Emma's stomach turned. Nathaniel's voice stayed flat. "Miss Whitaker is not property." Victor chuckled softly. "No, no, of course not. Forgive the poor phrasing. I refer to items belonging to the estate of the late Mr. Edmund Whitcomb." Emma's breath caught. There it was, not the full truth. Victor never began with the full truth. He laid down a clean piece first, then built his trap on top of it. Nathaniel glanced at her but did not ask the question in front of the street. Victor noticed. He noticed everything. "Miss Whitaker left Cincinnati in haste," he continued. "During that same week, certain papers also went missing from Mr. Whitcomb's private desk, papers of importance to his nephew and heir." "I took nothing," Emma said. Victor's face softened with false regret. "I am not here to accuse you harshly. I believe fear led you to poor judgment." "You believe whatever you are paid to believe." The schoolteacher from Bell House gave a tiny gasp behind the parlor curtain. Victor's eyes cooled, though his smile stayed. "I have come to offer mercy," he said. "Return the papers, come back with me, and Mr. Whitcomb's nephew may choose not to press the matter." Nathaniel shifted half a step closer. "She said she took nothing." "And yet," Victor replied, "she ran." The simple words slid through the street. Emma felt them land in every watching mind. She ran. Yes, she had. Because the day after old Edmund Whitcomb died, his nephew had told her there would be no wages paid to servants whose agreements were not written. Because Emma, who had sewn curtains, mended linen, kept the household accounts when the bookkeeper drank too much, and read letters aloud to a dying man, had asked for what she was owed. Because old Mr. Whitcomb, ill and lonely, had pressed a small envelope into her hands 2 nights before his death and whispered, "Keep it from Roger until you find a judge with a clean soul." Because Victor Harrow had come looking for that envelope. Because Aunt Ruth had found it hidden under Emma's mattress and demanded to know why men in suits were asking questions at her door. Because staying would have meant being crushed by names bigger than hers. "I left because there was no justice for me there," Emma said. Victor sighed. "A lovely line. Did you prepare it on the train?" Nathaniel took 1 step forward. Emma touched his sleeve before he could speak. The cloth was rough under her fingertips. He stilled at once. That obedience to a small touch stirred something inside her. She did not have to shout to be heard by him. Victor's eyes dropped to her hand on Nathaniel's sleeve. His mouth twitched. "I see the arrangement has become comfortable quickly." Emma's face warmed, but she refused to step back. Nathaniel's expression did not change, but his voice lowered. "You will mind your tongue." "Or what, Mr. Cross? Will you strike an officer of the court? You are a long way from your court. And you are one widower with a ranch, a child, and enough debt to make a bank clerk sweat." Nathaniel went still. Emma looked up at him. "Debt." Victor smiled again, pleased to see he had struck something tender. "Oh," he said, "Miss Whitaker does not know. How unfair. Then allow me to spare you future disappointment, Miss Whitaker. Cross Ranch is not the grand refuge you were promised. It is tired land under a tired name, a poor place for a woman hoping to rise." "That is enough," Hattie said from the doorway. Victor bowed slightly toward her. "Mrs. Bell, I only speak in concern." "What?" "No," Hattie said. "You speak because silence would leave you alone with yourself." A murmur went through the street. Someone laughed and tried to hide it with a cough. Victor's eyes flicked toward Hattie, then away. How colorful. Daniel had come out from the livery and stood behind his father. Emma felt him there before she saw him. Nathaniel did too. His shoulders changed. His anger pushed down under the weight of being a father first. Victor turned his attention to the boy. And this must be Daniel. Nathaniel moved at once, placing his body between Victor and his son. Victor lifted both hands in showy innocence. "No harm meant. I admire a devoted father. It must be difficult, keeping a motherless child while strangers come and go." Daniel's face tightened. Emma's anger rose so fast it almost frightened her. She stepped down from the porch. Nathaniel said quietly, "Miss Whitaker." But she kept going until she stood in front of Victor Harrow, close enough to see the dust on his polished boot. "You came for papers," she said. "Speak of papers. Do not speak of children." For one brief second, Victor's eyes showed his true temper. Then he hid it. "Very well, where are they?" "I do not have them." "Then you will not mind if I search your things." Nathaniel's voice cut in. "He will not touch your bag." Victor looked at him. "Sheriff Pike may feel differently." "Then fetch the sheriff." The street shifted. Folks looked toward the jail at the corner. The sheriff was nowhere in sight, but his name carried weight. Victor studied Nathaniel for a moment, then turned back to Emma. "I will give you one day," he said. "One day to remember what you know and save yourself trouble. I am staying at the hotel. Tomorrow at noon you will meet me at the sheriff's office. And if I do not, then I will let the law move without your cooperation." Emma had heard that tone before. It was the sound of a door locking. Victor tipped his hat. "Good morning, Miss Whitaker." He turned and walked away, his clean boots leaving sharp marks in the dust. For a moment, no one moved. Then Mercy Ridge began to whisper. Hattie stepped down beside Emma. "Inside, now." Beatrice looked shaken. "I did not know about any of this." Emma turned on her. "You did not ask enough to know." Beatrice flinched as if slapped. Nathaniel lifted Emma's carpetbag from the dust. "Come." Inside Bell House, Hattie shut the door hard enough to rattle the glass. The dining room smelled of coffee gone bitter on the stove. Daniel hovered near the entry, still watching Emma. Nathaniel noticed. "Go brush Juniper." "But Pa, now." Daniel looked at Emma's hands. "My horse." Emma realized she still held the broken toy. She knelt and gave it back gently. "I will fix him after supper if your father allows." Daniel looked to Nathaniel. Nathaniel nodded. The boy tucked the horse under his arm and slipped out. Only then did Nathaniel turn to Emma. "What papers?" Emma sank into a chair. The strength that had held her in the street began to drain away. Her knees trembled under her skirt. Hattie poured coffee and set it in front of her. "Drink first." Emma wrapped both hands around the cup. "There was an envelope," she said at last. "Old Mr. Whitcomb gave it to me before he died. I worked in his house, sewing, accounts, reading to him when his eyes failed. He trusted me more than his nephew liked." Nathaniel sat across from her. "What was in it?" "I do not know." Hattie frowned. "You never opened it." "No." "Where is it now?" Nathaniel asked. Emma looked down at the coffee. A bitter smile touched her mouth. "If I knew, Mr. Harrow would have dragged me back already." Nathaniel leaned forward. "Emma." It was the first time he had spoken her given name. Not Miss Whitaker, Emma. She looked up. "When I left Cincinnati, I hid the envelope inside the lining of my old blue coat. But the coat was stolen from the train depot in St. Louis." Hattie swore softly. Nathaniel's brow drew together. "Then Harrow is chasing you for something you no longer have." Yes. Does he know it? No, and if he believes I lost it, he may decide I am of no use at all. Silence filled the room. Outside, Juniper snorted in the stable yard. A wagon rolled by. Life continued as if Emma's future had not just narrowed to a single dangerous road. Beatrice spoke from near the door. Her voice was small now, stripped of its pride. I thought I was saving them. Emma looked at her. No, you were arranging them. Beatrice's eyes filled, but Emma could not tend another woman's guilt. Not yet. Nathaniel rose. You cannot stay in town. Hattie opened her mouth, but he went on. Harrow will push the sheriff. The town will feed on it. At the ranch there is space to think. Emma stood. I will not hide behind you. I am not asking you to hide. I am offering a roof and a door with a good lock. That sounds very close. He held her gaze. Then here is the difference. You may leave through that door whenever you choose. The words settled between them. Choice, a small word, a powerful one. Hattie nodded. Go, I will pack food. Beatrice stepped forward. Nathaniel, the town will talk. He looked at her. Let it learn a new subject. By sunset, Emma sat beside Nathaniel on the wagon seat as Mercy Ridge faded behind them. Her carpetbag rested at her feet. Daniel sat in the back with a blanket around his shoulders, holding his broken horse. The sky burned orange over the hills, and the trail ahead wound toward Cross Ranch like a question with no safe answer. After a long while, Nathaniel spoke without looking at her. I should tell you about the debt. Emma watched his hands on the reins, strong hands, careful hands. Yes, she said, you should. The wagon creaked on. Nathaniel drew a breath. I borrowed money after Abigail died, for medicine first, then burial, then seed after a hailstorm took the crop. The note comes due in 6 weeks. And if you cannot pay... He looked toward the darkening hills. Then Cross Ranch may belong to Beatrice's husband by Christmas. Emma turned to him. Her husband. George Vale holds the note. The pieces slid together slowly, then struck. Beatrice had sent for a bride. Her husband held Nathaniel's debt. Victor Harrow had followed Emma west. A false letter had brought them all to the same town. This was no simple mistake. Emma looked back at Mercy Ridge, where the first lamps were beginning to glow. In one of those lit windows, Victor Harrow was waiting. And somewhere in the darkening town, someone had wanted Emma at Cross Ranch badly enough to lie for it. Cross Ranch did not rise out of the hills like a grand promise. It appeared slowly, piece by piece, as the wagon climbed through the cool dusk. First came a long rail fence, leaning in places but still standing. Then a windmill with one bent blade turning with a tired groan. Then a barn shaped by age and weather, its red paint worn thin until gray boards showed through like old scars. Last came the house. Emma had expected something larger from a man whose name had crossed half the country in a marriage letter. The house was plain, built of squared logs with a stone chimney and a narrow porch. A blue shawl hung folded over the back of a rocking chair beside the door, though the evening held enough chill that no one had sat there lately. Abigail's shawl, Emma thought. She did not ask. Nathaniel stopped the wagon near the porch. He climbed down first, then turned and offered Emma his hand. For a second she looked at it, not because she feared him, not exactly, but because taking a man's hand meant something when a woman had arrived under false promises. It meant trusting that he would not use the gesture to claim more than she had given. Nathaniel waited without impatience. Emma placed her hand in his. His palm was warm and rough. He helped her down carefully, then released her at once. Daniel jumped from the wagon bed with the quick strength of a child used to ranch ground. He ran to the porch, then stopped at the rocking chair. His small fingers touched the blue shawl. Nathaniel saw it. His face changed before he looked away. Emma looked at the house instead. A lantern burned in the front window. Did you leave that lit? She asked. Nathaniel glanced up. No. His hand went still on the reins. Daniel turned. Aunt Bee was here. Nathaniel's mouth tightened. Maybe. Emma felt the air sharpen. He moved first. Stay by the wagon. Emma did not argue. There were times courage meant stepping forward and times it meant not making a man divide his attention. Nathaniel crossed the porch with quiet steps, though the boards creaked beneath him. He opened the door and stood framed in warm light. "Who is here?" He called. No answer came. He disappeared inside. Daniel edged closer to Emma. She put one hand lightly on his shoulder and he did not pull away. They listened. A chair scraped. A cupboard door opened and shut. Nathaniel's boots crossed the floor. Then he came back to the doorway holding a paper in his hand. "No one," he said, but his face told Emma something had been left behind. Inside, Cross Ranch smelled of wood smoke, dust, and dried herbs. The main room was simple but not uncared for. A table stood near the hearth with 3 chairs around it. One chair had a worn cushion tied neatly to the seat. A shelf held tin plates, a coffee pot, 2 blue cups, and 1 porcelain teacup with a crack through the handle. Near the window stood an upright piano, covered with a cloth. Dust lay over that cloth like gray snow. Emma noticed the silence around the piano. It was not the silence of disuse. It was the silence of memory kept behind a closed door. Nathaniel folded the paper and slipped it into his vest. "What was it?" Emma asked. He hesitated. "I told you I would not be kept ignorant," she said. He looked at her and a tired sigh left him. He handed her the paper. The note was short. "Nathaniel, you are acting from temper, not wisdom. The woman brings danger and gossip. Send her back to town before Mr. Harrow makes matters worse. George says the bank will not wait kindly on scandal." Emma read it twice. Then she handed it back. "She came into your house. She has a key." "Why?" Nathaniel looked toward the shawl on the porch. "After Abigail died, Beatrice came often to help with Daniel." "And she kept the key?" "Yes." Emma glanced around the room. "Does she still help or does she inspect?" Nathaniel's silence answered. Daniel carried his wooden horse to the table and sat. "Empy says Mama would not like dust." Nathaniel closed his eyes for a moment. Emma's anger softened. Not toward Beatrice, toward the child who had been handed grief in the shape of rules. She set her carpetbag beside the door and crossed to the table. "May I see your horse now?" Daniel looked surprised. "Tonight. Broken things get worse if everyone only talks about them." Nathaniel watched her carefully. Emma opened her sewing kit and took out a fine awl, thread, a scrap of brown leather, and a small strip of wood she had used once to stiffen a traveling trunk corner. Daniel leaned close, his elbows on the table. His hair fell over his eyes. "He is named Major," Daniel said. "A strong name. He used to stand. Then we shall ask him to stand again." She worked by lamplight while Nathaniel went out to tend the team. The wooden leg was split near the body. She could not make it perfect, but she wrapped the joint with leather, pinned it with a little strip, and bound it tight with thread rubbed in beeswax. Daniel watched every movement as if she were performing church magic. "Did your ma teach you?" he asked. "My mother taught me some. Work taught me the rest." "Where is your ma?" Emma's fingers paused. "Gone to heaven, I hope." Daniel nodded with the grave wisdom of a child who knew loss was not only for old people. "My mama, too." "Yes," Emma said softly, "I know." He looked toward the porch. "I remember her song, but not all of it." Emma tied off the thread. "Maybe your father remembers." Daniel shook his head. "He does not sing anymore." Outside, a bucket struck the ground harder than needed. Nathaniel had heard. Emma finished the repair and set Major upright on the table. The horse leaned slightly, but it stood. Daniel's face lit with wonder. "He stands." "He may not run races," Emma said, "but standing is no small thing." The boy touched the repaired leg with one finger. "Can I keep him by my bed?" "He belongs to you." Daniel took the horse, but before leaving the table, he looked at Emma as if trying to decide where to place her in his small, wounded world. "Are you going to marry Pa?" The question fell into the room just as Nathaniel stepped back through the door. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. Nathaniel froze. Daniel looked between them. "Aunt B said you came to be my new ma." Emma folded her hands slowly in her lap. I came because I was told your father wanted a wife, she said. But your father did not write that letter, so now we must let truth come before decisions. Daniel frowned. Does that mean no? It means no one should be made into family by a trick. Nathaniel's gaze rested on her with something deep and unreadable. Daniel nodded, though he did not look satisfied. I would not mind if you fixed more things. Then he took Major and went down the narrow hall. Emma released a breath. Nathaniel set the bucket near the stove. You answered him kindly. He asked honestly. Children do. Not only children should. That landed between them. Nathaniel removed his hat and set it on a peg. There are 2 rooms. Daniel has the small one. You can take mine. I will sleep out here near the hearth. No. His brow lifted. I will take a pallet near the stove, Emma said. This is your house. You are under my roof. You will have a door. And you have a son who has lost enough without finding his father sleeping like a hired hand in his own home. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment. You argue plain. I had to learn. I noticed. There was no smile, but there was warmth near the edge of his voice. They made a quiet supper from beans, cornbread, and dried apples. Daniel ate quickly, then climbed into his bed with Major tucked under one arm. Nathaniel checked the latch on every door and window. Emma noticed. Are you expecting Harrow tonight? I expect men like him to prefer other people unready. He lifted the lamp to check the back door. The light touched his face, deepening the shadows beneath his eyes. He looked less like a hard rancher then and more like a man who had spent too long guarding what little he had left. When the house was settled, Emma sat near the hearth with the cracked porcelain teacup in her hands. Nathaniel stood across the room beside the covered piano. She played. Emma asked. He looked at the cloth. Yes. The word was almost too quiet to hear. You do not have to speak of her. I know. But he remained there. Abigail believed every house needed music, he said at last, even a poor one. Emma watched the fire. Maybe she was right. Nathaniel's hand hovered over the piano cloth, then fell away. Outside, the wind moved over the ranch, rattling the dry grass against the walls. Somewhere far off, a coyote called, lonely and thin beneath the moon. Then came another sound, a horse. Nathaniel turned his head. Emma set down the teacup. The hoofbeats stopped near the barn. Nathaniel crossed to the rifle by the door and lifted it from its pegs. Stay here, he said, but Emma was already standing. Through the front window she saw a lantern moving in the dark. Then a man's voice called from the yard. Cross, open up, sheriff's business. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Emma knew before the door opened that Victor Harrow had not waited until noon. Nathaniel opened the door with the rifle held low, not pointed but not hidden. Cold night air pushed into the room. It carried the smell of dust, horse sweat, and rain waiting somewhere beyond the hills. In the yard, 2 lanterns burned gold against the dark. Sheriff Amos Pike stood near the porch steps, his hat pulled low and his coat buttoned tight. Beside him was Victor Harrow, clean and calm, as if he had not spent the evening dragging trouble behind him. A third man waited nearer the barn, still mounted. Emma could not see his face, only the shape of him under a dark hat. Sheriff Pike was not a large man, but he had the tired look of someone who had learned that a badge did not make life simple. His gray beard was cut short. His eyes moved from Nathaniel to the rifle, then past him into the house. Evening, Nate. Sheriff. Need to speak with Miss Whitaker. Emma stepped forward before Nathaniel could answer. I am here. Nathaniel glanced at her, displeased but not surprised. Sheriff Pike removed his hat. That small gesture settled Emma's nerves more than she expected. A rough man could still be fair if he remembered manners at a woman's door. Ma'am, he said, sorry to come late. Victor smiled. The law does not always keep parlor hours. No one asked you, the sheriff said without looking at him. Victor's smile thinned. Emma almost liked the sheriff for that. Nathaniel opened the door wider, but his body still filled half the space. "Say what you came to say." Sheriff Pike looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Harrow has brought papers from Ohio. He says Miss Whitaker is wanted for questioning regarding missing estate documents." "I told him I do not have them," Emma said. "Did you ever have them?" The question was plain, not accusing. That helped. Emma drew a breath. "Yes, Mr. Edmund Whitcomb gave me a sealed envelope before he died. I did not open it. I hid it in the lining of my blue coat. That coat was stolen from the St. Louis depot before I came west." Victor gave a soft laugh. "A convenient misfortune." Emma turned to him. "Most misfortunes are convenient only to the people who cause them." Nathaniel's mouth twitched, but the moment passed quickly. Sheriff Pike looked at Victor. "You said she denied ever touching the papers." Victor adjusted his gloves. "I said she denied possessing them." "That is not the same." "No, Sheriff, it is not." Victor's voice sharpened. "But she admits now that she carried property belonging to the Whitcomb estate across state lines." Emma felt the words closing around her. Nathaniel stepped onto the porch. "Property handed to her by the man who owned it." "An old man at death's door," Victor replied. "Easily confused, easily influenced by a pretty servant with access to his private rooms." The accusation hung in the cold air. Emma's face burned. Nathaniel moved so suddenly the porch board cracked under his boot. Sheriff Pike lifted a hand. "Nate." Nathaniel stopped, but only just. The rifle stayed down. His eyes stayed on Victor. "You will not speak of her that way on my land." Victor looked at the rifle. "Your land for now." Those 4 words did what insult could not. Nathaniel went silent. Emma heard it, the debt. The note held by George Vale, 6 weeks until Christmas. Victor knew too much for a stranger. She looked past him to the mounted man near the barn. "Who is that?" Sheriff Pike turned. "That is Mr. George Vale." The mounted man shifted in the saddle, and the lantern light found his face. George Vale was handsome in a careful, polished way. He wore a dark wool coat with brass buttons and a banker's neat beard. He looked like a man who never raised his voice because money had always done the shouting for him. He tipped his hat. "Miss Whitaker." Emma said nothing. Nathaniel's voice was low. "Why are you here, George?" George smiled faintly. "Because this matter touches my family." "No," Nathaniel said, "it touches my house." "And Beatrice is worried. She fears you are letting sympathy cloud judgment." "She should have thought of judgment before she forged my name." The sheriff's eyes snapped toward George. "Forged?" Victor looked sharply at George as well. George's smile remained, but it tightened. "My wife acted from concern for Daniel. The law may call it unwise. I would not call it forgery." "I would," Nathaniel said. Sheriff Pike turned to Emma. "Do you have the letter?" "Yes." "May I see it?" Emma looked at Nathaniel. He nodded once but did not decide for her. She went to her carpetbag near the hearth and took out the creased letter. For one strange second she held it close. That false promise had carried her through hunger, fear, and miles of strange land. Now it was only paper, but her hand hated letting it go. She gave it to the sheriff. He held it near the lantern and read. The house was so quiet Emma could hear Daniel breathing in the hall. He had woken and come to stand barefoot near his bedroom door. Major, the wooden horse clutched to his chest. Nathaniel saw him. Pain crossed his face. "Danny, go back to bed." "Is Miss Emma in trouble?" No one answered fast enough. Victor did. "That depends on whether she tells the truth, child." Nathaniel turned on him. "Speak to my son again, and you leave this yard one way or another." Sheriff Pike folded the letter. "Mr. Harrow, stand quiet." Victor's jaw tightened. Emma crossed to Daniel and crouched before him. "I am all right." "Are they taking you away?" She wanted to promise no. The word rose in her throat, warm and ready, but lies had brought her here. She would not add another. "I do not know," she said, "but I am not going anywhere tonight without saying goodbye." Daniel looked at Nathaniel. Pa. Nathaniel's voice softened. No one is taking her tonight. The boy believed his father. It was plain in his eyes. Emma wondered what it must feel like to trust someone that completely. Sheriff Pike tucked the letter into his coat. I am keeping this for now. Emma stood. That letter proves I was brought here under false terms. It proves something, the sheriff said. I need to think on what. Victor stepped forward. Sheriff, with respect, the woman has admitted to transporting estate papers. She has no family here, no husband, no standing. She is a flight risk. Nathaniel's face went hard. She has standing under my roof, he said. Victor smiled. Under your roof as what? The question landed like a thrown knife. Emma felt every eye move to her. Sheriff Pike, George Vale, Victor, even Daniel in the doorway. What was she at Cross Ranch? Not wife, not kin, not exactly servant, not exactly guest. Nathaniel's voice came slowly. As a hired woman under my protection. Victor gave a pleased sigh. How noble, yet fragile. Hired women can be dismissed. Guests can be asked to leave. A wife, on the other hand, would complicate matters. Emma looked at him. There was the trap. If Nathaniel married her quickly, Victor could say she had done it to escape the law. If he did not, Victor could push the sheriff to remove her as a woman with no claim in the territory. George Vale's horse stamped near the barn. Sheriff Pike frowned as if he did not like seeing the trap but could not yet break it. I will not arrest her tonight, the sheriff said. But Miss Whitaker, I need you in town tomorrow by noon to give a proper statement. Nathaniel answered before Emma could. She will be there. Emma turned to him. He looked back at her. You said you would not run in daylight. Her throat tightened. He had remembered. Yes, she said, I will be there. Victor's smile returned. Excellent. I am glad reason still has a chair at this table. Sheriff Pike put his hat back on. We are done here. Victor did not move right away. His eyes swept over the room behind Nathaniel. The simple table, the covered piano, the boy in the hall, Emma by the hearth. A look of dislike passed over his face, as if this poor little house had offended him by offering shelter without his permission. Then his gaze stopped on the cracked porcelain teacup near Emma's chair. For just a breath his expression changed. Recognition. Emma saw it and a chill moved through her. Why would Victor Harrow recognize Abigail Cross's teacup? George Vale cleared his throat. We should go. Victor looked away at once. Of course. The men turned toward their horses. Sheriff Pike paused at the steps. Nate, he said quietly, keep your temper tomorrow. Nathaniel gave no promise. The sheriff looked at Emma. And you, ma'am, bring whatever truth you have. Bring all of it. I will. The hoofbeats faded down the road, lanterns shrinking into the dark until the ranch was alone again. Nathaniel shut the door and barred it. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Daniel said, I do not like that man. Emma looked down at him. Neither do I. Is he from where you used to live? Yes. Then I am glad you left. The simple words pierced her. She blinked hard. Nathaniel knelt and rested a hand on his son's shoulder. Bed now. Daniel hesitated, then held Major out to Emma. He stands better now. So will I, Emma said softly. The boy seemed satisfied and went back to bed. When his door closed, Nathaniel turned to Emma. What did you see? She should have been surprised he noticed. She was not. Victor looked at that teacup as if he knew it. Nathaniel's eyes moved to the cup. That was Abigail S. Did she know anyone from Ohio? No, she was born in Mercy Ridge. Did Victor ever come here before? Not that I know. Emma crossed to the cup and picked it up. The porcelain was thin, painted with tiny violets near the rim. A crack ran from the handle down to the base, neatly mended with old glue. Nathaniel's voice was rough. Abigail dropped it the week before she died, cried like it was a living thing. I fixed it badly, but she kept using it. Emma turned the cup gently in her hand. On the underside, almost hidden beneath the curve of the base, were two small letters painted in blue. E.W. Emma went still. Nathaniel. He stepped closer. She showed him the letters, his brow furrowed. Those are not Abigail's initials. No, Emma whispered, they are mine. The fire snapped behind them. Outside, the last sound of the riders disappeared into the hills. Nathaniel stared at the cup as if it had become a message from the dead. Emma held it carefully, afraid now not of breaking it, but of what had already been broken long before she arrived. Somehow, years before a false letter brought her to Mercy Ridge, something bearing Emma Whitaker's initials had already been inside Abigail Cross's house. If this small act of kindness touched your heart, don't forget to like this story, because the truth hidden in Cross Ranch is only beginning to wake. Emma did not sleep with the teacup in her hand, but she might as well have. It sat on the small table beside her pallet, catching the low firelight in its cracked white curve. Two blue letters waited beneath it, hidden unless someone turned the cup over and looked closely. E.W. Emma Whitaker. Her own name painted on a dead woman's teacup in a ranch house she had never seen before yesterday. The house had quieted around her. Daniel slept down the hall. Nathaniel lay in the main room near the door with one arm folded under his head, his boots still on, his rifle close enough to reach in one breath. He had not asked her to trust the lock alone. He had made himself part of the door. That should have frightened her. Instead, it settled her. The wind scraped along the outside walls, pushing dry grass against the logs. Somewhere in the barn, Juniper shifted in his stall. Emma stared at the teacup until her eyes burned. Near midnight, Nathaniel's voice came softly from the floor. "You awake?" "Yes. I thought so." She turned her head. The fire had burned low, leaving his face half-shadowed. He looked tired in a way sleep could not cure. "Did Abigail ever mention anyone named Whitaker?" Emma asked. "No." "Edmund Whitcomb?" "No." "Victor Harrow?" His jaw tightened. "No." Emma looked back at the cup. Then why was this here? Nathaniel sat up slowly, rubbing one hand over his face. "I have been asking myself the same question since you found it." "You did not know about the initials." "I knew there were letters. I thought they marked the maker. Abigail bought it at a church sale the spring before Daniel was born. She liked the violets." Emma picked up the cup, careful with the broken handle. "A church sale in Mercy Ridge." "Yes." "Who donated it?" "I do not remember." But his face changed. Emma saw the thought arrive and settle heavily behind his eyes. "You do remember something," she said. Nathaniel rose and crossed to the hearth. He stood with his hands braced against the mantel, looking down into the coals. "There was a trunk," he said. "A small one, blue with brass corners. It came into the church lot with things from the old stage office after Mr. Pritchard died. The stage agent. He kept records packages, lost freight. Folks said half the town's misplaced things lived in his back room. After he passed, the church sold what no family claimed." Emma held the cup tighter. "And Abigail bought the trunk." "No, Beatrice did." The name dropped into the room like a stone down a well. Nathaniel turned from the fire. "Abigail bought the teacup from inside it." "Beatrice bought the trunk itself." Emma sat up straighter. "Does Beatrice still have it?" "I do not know. She might." He nodded once. A new thought moved through Emma, sharp and bright. Her stolen blue coat, the hidden envelope, the unknown papers, Victor's recognition of the teacup, Beatrice's false letters, George Vale holding Nathaniel's debt, all separate pieces yet somehow touching at the edges. "We need to see that trunk," Emma said. Nathaniel looked toward Daniel's closed door. "Not tonight." "No, tomorrow before we go to the sheriff." His eyes met hers. "Beatrice may not welcome us. She should have considered that before she brought me here." Something like a smile almost crossed his face. "You do not scare easy once you have had time to stand." "I scare plenty," Emma said. "I simply dislike giving people the pleasure of seeing it." His expression softened. For a moment the room was only firelight and quiet. She noticed his hair was loose from its tie, falling across his brow. He looked less guarded in the dark, as if grief took off its hat when no one was meant to see. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you." "I will." Neither believed the other. In the morning, frost silvered the ranch yard. Emma rose before the sun and found Nathaniel already outside breaking ice on the water trough. Daniel sat at the table with his wooden horse beside his plate, eating cornbread soaked in milk. "You fixed him better than Pa," Daniel said when Emma came in. Nathaniel stepped through the door at that exact moment, carrying a bucket. "I heard that." Daniel grinned. It was the first true smile Emma had seen from him. Miss Emma sews smaller. "She does," Nathaniel said, setting down the bucket, "and speaks sharper." Emma glanced at him, not sure whether to take offense. His eyes warmed just enough to answer. Breakfast was plain but peaceful. Emma fried potatoes while Nathaniel sliced yesterday's bread. Daniel told the Major had once led a whole army across the kitchen floor and defeated 3 tin soldiers and a spool of thread. Nathaniel listened with quiet patience, but Emma saw something ease in him each time Daniel spoke freely. This house was not dead. It was waiting. After breakfast, Nathaniel hitched the wagon. Emma wrapped herself in her dark shawl and placed Abigail's teacup in a padded basket, though every part of her felt strange, carrying another woman's keepsake back toward the woman who might hold its secret. On the road to town, Daniel sat between them. Nathaniel had meant to leave him with Hattie, but the boy begged to come, and after the night visit, Nathaniel did not want him out of sight. The morning was cold and bright. Meadowlarks flashed over the fence posts. Wagon wheels cut through frozen ruts. Emma watched the ranch fall behind them and realized she was already learning the shape of it. The leaning fence, the crooked windmill, the porch where the blue shawl waited. Not home, not yet, but no longer only a strange place. Daniel leaned against Nathaniel's side, half asleep. Nathaniel kept the reins in one hand and tucked his coat around the boy with the other. The movement was simple, practiced, tender. Emma looked away before he caught her watching. Too late. "You have a question," he said. "I have many." "Ask one." She chose carefully. "Why did Beatrice's husband lend you money?" Nathaniel looked ahead. "Because no bank would." "And George Vale offered kindness." "He offered terms." "What terms?" "The ranch as security. 20% interest if I miss the first payment." Emma stared at him. "That is not a loan, that is a snare." "I know that now." "Did Beatrice urge you to take it?" A muscle moved in his cheek. "Yes." Daniel stirred between them, and Nathaniel's voice lowered. "After Abigail died, I could not think straight. Doctor's bills, funeral cost, cattle fever, hail damage. I stood in my own field and could not remember what task came next. George came with papers. Beatrice said family helps family." Emma watched his hand tighten around the reins. "And then family waited for you to fail." He did not answer. He did not need to. Mercy Ridge came into sight beneath a clear sky. Smoke rose from chimneys. A few people paused as the Cross wagon rolled in. By noon, everyone would know Emma had returned instead of fleeing. Beatrice's dress shop stood between the bakery and the apothecary, with green curtains and a painted sign that read Vale Fine Dressmaking. A bell chimed when they entered. The shop smelled of lavender sachets, new cloth, and starch. Bolts of fabric lined the walls in careful colors: calico, wool, muslin, blue silk too fine for most women in Mercy Ridge to touch. Beatrice stood behind the counter measuring ribbon for the school teacher. When she saw them, the ribbon slipped from her fingers. "Nathaniel." "We need to speak," he said. The schoolteacher took one look at his face, gathered her parcel, and left with a quiet good morning. The bell stopped trembling after the door closed. Beatrice looked at Daniel. "Sweetheart, why don't you choose a peppermint from the jar?" Daniel moved toward the counter but did not take one. He had begun to understand adults offered sweets when they wanted children not to hear. Emma stepped forward and set the basket down. Beatrice's eyes found the teacup. All color drained from her face. Nathaniel saw it. "You know it." Beatrice swallowed. It was Abigail S. Before Abigail. Beatrice looked at Emma and fear passed through her polished face. Emma spoke quietly. There was a trunk from the old stage office, blue with brass corners. You bought it at the church sale. Beatrice gripped the edge of the counter. Who told you that? No one who wants to harm you, Emma said. But someone is trying to harm me. If that trunk holds answers, I need them. Beatrice shook her head. It was years ago. Do you still have it? Nathaniel asked. She did not answer. Nathaniel's voice hardened. Beatrice. Her eyes filled suddenly. I kept it because Abigail wanted the cup. I thought there might be more pieces like it. I meant to give them to her. Where is it? At my house. Emma's heart beat faster. Beatrice looked toward the back room, then leaned closer. George must not know. Nathaniel went still. Why? She pressed a hand to her mouth. For the first time since Emma had met her, Beatrice looked less like a proud woman and more like a frightened one trapped inside fine clothes. Because he asked about that trunk last night, she whispered, after Mr. Harrow came. Emma's blood chilled. What did he ask? Nathaniel said, if I had ever opened the hidden drawer. Emma stared at her. There is a hidden drawer. Beatrice nodded, tears standing in her eyes. Did you open it? Emma asked. Yes. What was inside? Before Beatrice could answer, the bell above the shop door rang. George Vale stepped in. His smile was calm, but his eyes went at once to the basket, then to his wife's pale face. Well, he said softly, what a touching family gathering. Daniel moved closer to Nathaniel. George shut the door behind him and turned the lock. The small click sounded louder than a gunshot. George Vale stood with his back to the locked door, smiling as if he had merely stepped in to buy thread. No one moved. The dress shop seemed suddenly smaller. Bolts of bright fabric lined the walls like silent witnesses. Dust floated in the pale morning light. The locked door had not trapped them fully. There was a back room, perhaps a rear exit, perhaps not. But the click of the lock had changed the air all the same. Nathaniel set one hand on Daniel's shoulder and drew him close. Unlock the door, George, he said. George lifted his brows. Why, I thought we were speaking as family. We stopped being family the day you set interest on grief. Beatrice made a small sound. George, please. He did not look at her. Quiet, Beatrice. Emma saw Beatrice flinch. It was slight, almost hidden by the way she lowered her chin. But Emma had spent too much of her life around men who ruled rooms without shouting. She recognized the fear in another woman's shoulders. Nathaniel recognized it too. His face darkened. George turned his attention to Emma. Miss Whitaker, you have caused a great stir for someone who claimed to want a modest life. I claimed no such thing to you. No, but women like you always speak of wanting little while bringing ruin in both hands. Nathaniel stepped forward, but Emma touched his sleeve, just once. He stopped. She looked at George. Where is the trunk? His smile cooled. What trunk? The blue one with brass corners. Beatrice whispered, Emma. George's eyes snapped to his wife. So you told them. Beatrice's fingers trembled against the counter. They found the cup. Of course they did. George sighed, almost with disappointment. You always did keep things too long. Daniel looked up at his father. Pa. Nathaniel knelt, keeping his voice steady. Danny, go with Miss Hattie if she comes in. Until then, stay behind me. But the door is locked. I know. Emma's eyes moved through the shop. A heavy iron tailor's weight sat near a basket of lace. Scissors lay open on the counter. Behind Beatrice, a curtain led to the workroom. George followed Emma's glance and laughed softly. No need to plan a battle. I did not come to harm anyone. Then unlock the door, Emma said. I came to prevent foolishness. There is a difference. Nathaniel's voice was low. You mean you came to stop us from finding what Harrow wants? George's smile vanished for the first time. That was answer enough. Beatrice covered her mouth. George, what have you done? What you were too soft to do, he said. I protected our future. Our future. She gave a weak laugh that held no joy. You mean your accounts? He turned on her then, and the smoothness dropped away. Those accounts keep food on your table and silk in this shop. This shop was my father's. And it would be dust without my management. The words hit Beatrice in a place old and bruised. Emma saw it. Nathaniel saw it. Even Daniel seemed to understand that his aunt had become smaller in her own doorway. Emma stepped closer to the counter. "Mr. Vale," she said, keeping her voice calm, "Victor Harrow came here for papers that belonged to Edmund Whitcomb. Did you bring him?" George looked back at her. "I received a letter from him asking whether a certain woman had arrived in town. I answered truthfully." "You told him I was here." "I told him there was a woman at Bell House by your description." "And before that, did you help Beatrice send for me?" Beatrice turned sharply toward him. George took too long to answer. Emma felt the truth begin to show its bones. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "George." George straightened his cuffs. "Beatrice wanted you remarried. She spoke of it day and night until any man would have done something simply to hear peace." "I wrote Mrs. Larkin," Beatrice said, voice shaking. "I wrote because I thought Daniel needed care, because you would not listen, Nate, because I thought if the right woman came, the house might feel alive again." Emma did not soften toward the deceit, but she heard the grief inside it. George smiled thinly. "My wife sent the first letter. I only made sure Miss Whitaker received the second." Nathaniel looked as if he might strike him. Emma's stomach twisted. "You wrote the final letter?" "Yes." "You signed Nathaniel's name?" "I have handled enough of his notes to know the shape of it." Beatrice gripped the counter. "Why?" George's eyes moved toward the basket where the teacup lay wrapped. "Because Harrow's inquiry interested me. A woman connected to missing estate papers, a widowed rancher in need of a wife, a debt soon due. Sometimes Providence lays pieces on a table and a wise man arranges them." Nathaniel's voice was dangerous. "You arranged Emma into my house." "I arranged opportunity." "For whom?" Emma asked. "For everyone if you had played your parts." George looked at Nathaniel. "You needed a wife. She needed shelter. Harrow needed his papers. I needed assurance that my note would be paid or my property secured." "Your property," Nathaniel said. "The ranch will be mine in 6 weeks if you do not pay." Daniel made a tiny sound. Nathaniel's hand tightened on his son's shoulder. "Not another word about that in front of my boy." George glanced at Daniel as if remembering he was there. "Sentiment again. It has never served you well." Emma moved before thinking. She stepped between George and Daniel, still keeping space, still keeping dignity, but placing herself clearly where Daniel could not be looked at like a debt on a ledger. George studied her. "You are bolder than your letters suggested." "My letters were honest," Emma said. "Yours were not." A sound came from outside, a wagon wheel. Then Hattie Bell's voice through the door. "Beatrice, why is this door locked?" Relief flashed across Beatrice's face. George reached for the lock, but Nathaniel moved faster. He crossed the shop in 3 strides and caught George's wrist before he touched it. "You do not open that door and smile this away," Nathaniel said. "Not this time." George looked down at Nathaniel's hand. "Let go." "No. You are making a mistake." "I have made plenty. This is not one." Hattie pounded on the door. "Open up before I fetch the sheriff and tell him George Vale is locking women in shops before noon." Outside, someone gasped. Someone else muttered. "Good," Emma thought. "Let the town hear this." George pulled his wrist free with a jerk. "Very well, let the old hen in." Beatrice looked at him with something breaking in her face. Not grief, not fear, disgust. She went to the door herself and turned the key. Hattie swept in like a storm in a brown bonnet. Her eyes moved over every face, then fixed on George. "Well," she said, "do you want to explain or shall I guess loudly?" Behind her, several townspeople hovered near the boardwalk. The schoolteacher stood among them, one hand pressed to her throat. The blacksmith had come too, hammer still in hand. George forced a laugh. Mrs. Bell, always dramatic. Hattie pointed at Emma. Did this man threaten you? George sighed. No. Emma spoke before anyone else could. He admitted he wrote the final letter that brought me here under Mr. Cross's name. The shop seemed to hold its breath. Hattie looked delighted and furious at once. Did he now? Nathaniel said, and he has some connection to Victor Harrow. George's face hardened. Careful. Beatrice stepped out from behind the counter. Her voice shook, but she did not retreat. He asked me about the hidden drawer in the trunk. He knew about it before I told him. The people outside whispered louder. Hattie looked at Beatrice. What was inside? Beatrice stared at George. He stared back. For years, Emma guessed Beatrice had obeyed that look. She had quieted under it, folded herself around it, made excuses for it. But today her plan had brought a real woman into danger, had placed Daniel in fear, had dragged Abigail's memory into a trap. Perhaps guilt could do what courage alone could not. Beatrice lifted her chin. There was a packet of letters, she said. Old letters tied with blue ribbon, and a bank draft. George's nostrils flared. Nathaniel went still. A bank draft. Beatrice nodded. Made payable to Edmund Whitcomb. Emma felt her pulse quicken. From whom? She asked. Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. From my father. Nathaniel stepped back as if the room had shifted under him. Beatrice continued, words spilling faster now. I did not understand it then. I was young and Abigail was expecting Daniel. I thought it was some old business. George found the letters after we married. He took them. George said sharply, that is enough. No, Beatrice's voice rose. No, it is not. You told me it had nothing to do with us. You told me to forget. Then years later, after Abigail died, you suddenly wanted Cross Ranch. You pushed Nathaniel into the loan. You said the land was worth more than he knew. Nathaniel's face had gone pale beneath the sun-browned skin. Emma looked from him to Beatrice. Why would your father send money to Edmund Whitcomb? Beatrice shook her head. I do not know. But George knew. Everyone could see it. Hattie stepped fully into the room. George Vale, if you have letters that belong in this matter, you had better fetch them before Sheriff Pike fetches you. George smiled, but now it was ugly. You all mistake gossip for law. No, Emma said. We mistake fear for power. It is an easy error when a man spends years teaching it. The words struck him hard. George turned toward her, eyes cold. You should have stayed in Ohio. Nathaniel moved between them. George looked at him and lowered his voice. You think she is some wronged angel. Ask her why Whitcomb trusted a servant with private papers. Ask what she did to earn that trust. Emma felt the old shame try to rise, but it found less room than before. Nathaniel did not turn to look at her. He kept his eyes on George. I know enough. No, you know what she has chosen to show you. Nathaniel's voice came quiet. That is more than you have ever shown anyone. The door behind George stood open now. The crowd outside had grown. Sheriff Pike was coming down the street, drawn by Hattie's promised noise. Victor Harrow stood across the way near the hotel porch, watching with narrow eyes. George saw the sheriff. Something quick and calculating passed over his face. Then he stepped backward through the door. Nathaniel, he said, smoothing his coat, be at the sheriff's office at noon. Bring your hired woman. Bring your accusations too. I look forward to hearing them under a roof where facts matter. He turned and walked down the steps before anyone could stop him. Victor Harrow met his eyes from across the street. It was brief, but Emma saw the message pass between them. They were not friends, not exactly. They were men holding different ends of the same rope. Sheriff Pike arrived at the shop door. What happened here? Hattie answered before anyone could. A great deal, Amos. Try to keep up. For the first time that morning, Daniel laughed. It was small, shaky, but real. The sound softened Nathaniel's face and nearly broke Emma's heart. Beatrice sank into a chair behind the counter. All pride had gone out of her. She looked at Nathaniel, then at Emma. I am sorry, she whispered. Not in the way people say when they are caught. I am sorry in the way a person is when she sees the harm after pretending it was help. Emma did not forgive her, not yet, but she believed the sentence. Nathaniel looked at his sister-in-law. Where is the trunk now? At my house, Beatrice said, in the attic. And the hidden drawer? She swallowed, empty. Because George took the letters, Emma said, yes. Emma looked toward the street, where George Vale and Victor Harrow had vanished in opposite directions, each carrying part of a truth they did not want opened. Then she looked at Daniel's wooden horse peeking from his coat pocket, one repaired leg standing firm. Broken things could stand, not always as before, not without marks, but they could stand. At noon, Emma would enter the sheriff's office not as a shamed woman running from Ohio, and not as a false bride delivered by a lie. She would enter with Nathaniel Cross beside her, a frightened sister-in-law behind her, and a town finally listening. And for the first time since the train pulled away from Mercy Ridge, Emma wondered if the false letter had not brought her to the wrong place after all. At noon, Mercy Ridge gathered without being invited. Men stood outside the sheriff's office with their hats low and their hands in their pockets. Women paused across the street with baskets over their arms, pretending to talk about flour and thread, while their eyes fixed on the jailhouse door. Even the schoolchildren had slowed near the pump, whispering behind cupped hands until their teacher sent them back with a look. Emma Whitaker saw them all from the wagon seat. The town that had watched her arrive alone now watched her return beside Nathaniel Cross. That mattered. She wished it did not, but it did. Nathaniel drew the team to a stop. Daniel sat between them, silent and pale. Beatrice Vale followed behind in her own small buggy, sitting straight as a church candle, her gloved hands tight on the reins. She had insisted on coming. I started this, she had said at the dress shop, voice unsteady but clear. I will not hide in lace while others answer for it. Emma had said nothing then. Forgiveness was not a shawl she could hand over just because Beatrice had grown cold. Still, Beatrice had come. That mattered too. Nathaniel climbed down and offered Emma his hand. She took it. The street saw, let it see. Her boots touched the dirt. Her brown dress was plain but clean. She had brushed the dust from the hem that morning and pinned her hair with care. In one hand she carried Abigail's cracked teacup wrapped in cloth. In the other she held the false letter. Nathaniel leaned close enough that only she could hear. You are steady. No, Emma said, but I am standing. His eyes softened. That will do. Sheriff Pike opened the office door before they reached it. He looked over their small party, then past them to the watching street. Seems half the town has business with my front step today, he muttered. Hattie Bell, who had arrived earlier and planted herself near the stove inside, called out. That is what happens when men whisper long enough. Women eventually bring chairs. Sheriff Pike sighed, come in. The office smelled of old coffee, paper, gun oil, and damp wool. A potbelly stove clicked in the corner, though the day was only cool. A map of the county hung crooked on the wall. Behind the desk sat Victor Harrow as if he belonged there. George Vale stood near the window, gloves in hand, face smooth as polished bone. Emma saw at once that they had prepared themselves. Clean coats, calm faces. Two men ready to turn truth into paperwork. Nathaniel saw it too. He placed himself at Emma's side, not in front of her this time. Sheriff Pike shut the door, cutting off the street's hungry eyes. Let us begin, he said. Miss Whitaker, tell it from the start. So Emma did. Her voice shook only once when she spoke Edmund Whitcomb's name. She told of his house in Cincinnati, of the months of unpaid wages after his sickness worsened, of how she read to him in the afternoons when his hands trembled too much to hold letters. She told of his nephew, Roger Whitcomb, who had begun searching drawers before his uncle was even cold. She told of the sealed envelope the old man had placed in her keeping. I was told to keep it safe until I found a judge with a clean soul, Emma said. Sheriff Pike wrote that down slowly. Victor gave a soft, amused breath. A charming phrase. Emma looked at him. Those were his words. And yet you never opened this vital envelope. No. Convenient again. Nathaniel's hand moved slightly at his side, not toward his gun, toward hers. He did not take it, but his knuckles brushed her fingers once. A quiet reminder. She was not alone. George Vale spoke from the window. Miss Whitaker admits she carried estate papers without legal authority. Beatrice, who had taken a chair near the wall, lifted her head. And you admit you wrote a false letter that brought her here. George turned slowly toward his wife, Beatrice. She flinched but did not fold. No, you will not say my name like a warning, not today. The room stilled. Hattie smiled into her coffee cup. Sheriff Pike looked at George. Is that true? George sighed. My wife had already contacted the agency. I helped complete an arrangement she began. You forged Nathaniel Cross's name. I imitated it for a harmless domestic purpose. Harmless? Emma repeated. Victor cut in. The letter is separate from the missing documents. Maybe, Sheriff Pike said, maybe not. He turned to Beatrice. Tell me about the trunk. Beatrice gripped the arms of her chair. Years ago, after old Mr. Pritchard died, the church sold unclaimed items from the stage office. I bought a blue trunk with brass corners. It had a teacup inside. Abigail liked it, so I gave it to her. Later, I found a hidden drawer. There were letters tied with blue ribbon and a bank draft made payable to Edmund Whitcomb. Sheriff Pike stopped writing. From whom? My father. Walter Bellamy. Nathaniel looked at her sharply. Abigail's father. Yes. Victor leaned back. A family debt, perhaps, hardly strange. Beatrice turned on him. The bank draft was for $15,000. Even Hattie went quiet. $15,000. The number filled the room like thunder. Nathaniel's ranch, his debt, the false bride, the Ohio lawyer, everything seemed to draw around that sum. Sheriff Pike stared at Beatrice. You are certain? Yes. George spoke quickly. My wife misremembers. It was years ago, and grief has troubled her mind since Abigail died. Beatrice stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. Do not use my grief to make me small. George's face changed. The mask cracked, showing anger beneath. Beatrice's voice grew stronger. I saw the number. I saw my father's hand. I saw the name Edmund Whitcomb. When I asked you, you told me it concerned land speculation and that decent wives did not trouble themselves with old business. Sheriff Pike looked at George. Where are those letters now? I do not have them. Emma watched his hands. He was holding his gloves too tightly. Nathaniel saw it too. Victor rose. Sheriff, this is wandering far from the matter. I came for Miss Whitaker, not Mr. Vale's household memories. Sit down, Sheriff Pike said. Victor did not. The sheriff's eyes cooled. Sit, Mr. Harrow, or stand outside. Victor sat. A knock came at the door. Everyone turned. Sheriff Pike opened it a crack. The schoolteacher, Miss Lydia Park, stood outside with worry written plain across her face. Sheriff, she said, I am sorry. Mrs. Bell told me to come if I remembered anything about the trunk. Hattie lifted her cup in a proud little salute. Sheriff Pike opened the door wider. Come in, Miss Park. Lydia stepped inside, twisting her gloves. She was a thin young woman with ink on one finger and spectacles hanging from a ribbon around her neck. I was a girl when that church sale happened, she said. My mother helped sort things. I remember the blue trunk because I wanted it for dolls. She looked at Beatrice. Mrs. Vale bought it, yes, but there was a shipping card still tucked under the strap. Emma held her breath. What did it say? The sheriff asked. Lydia swallowed. Whitaker, E. Whitaker, Mercy Ridge to Cincinnati. Emma's legs went weak. Nathaniel reached for her elbow, steadying without making show of it. My name, Emma whispered. Victor's eyes sharpened. George said too quickly, childhood memory is poor evidence. Lydia's face flushed. I teach children, Mr. Vale. I know the difference between guessing and remembering. Hattie gave a satisfied hum. Good girl. Sheriff Pike wrote again. Miss Whitaker, do you have family who lived here? No, not that I know. Nathaniel looked at the teacup in her hands. E. Whitaker. Emma slowly unwrapped it and set it on the sheriff's desk. The little blue initials showed beneath the base. Sheriff Pike turned the cup over, frowning. Well, I will be. Victor stared at it with a hunger he failed to hide. Emma saw the truth then. Not all of it, but enough. You knew, she said to him. When you saw this at the ranch, you knew it mattered. Victor folded his hands. I recognized a family marking from Mr. Whitcomb's records. Which records? He did not answer. Nathaniel said, the ones in the envelope. Victor looked at him and silence gave him away. Sheriff Pike leaned forward. Mr. Harrow, I advise you to choose your next words carefully. Before Victor could speak, the outer door opened again. A deputy stepped in holding a muddy blue bundle. Sheriff, he said, boy from the freight office brought this. Said it was found in a storage crate that came up from St. Louis last week. He heard talk of a missing coat. Emma rose without feeling her knees. The deputy placed the bundle on the desk. Her old blue coat, dirty. Torn at one sleeve, but hers, her hands trembled as she touched it. The wool still held the faint scent of train smoke and rain. Sheriff Pike looked at her. May I? Emma nodded. He took a knife and carefully opened the lining near the hem. For one awful moment there was nothing. Then a folded oilcloth packet slid onto the desk. Victor stood. George moved toward the door. Nathaniel stepped into his path. No, Nathaniel said. Sheriff Pike picked up the packet. The oilcloth was stiff with age. Inside lay several papers and one letter sealed long ago, the wax cracked but still clinging. On the front, written in a fading hand, were the words, for Emma Whitaker, rightful heir to the Bellamy grazing claim and the south water rights of Mercy Ridge. The room vanished around her. Rightful heir. Emma stared at the words until they blurred. Beatrice began to cry quietly. Nathaniel looked at Emma as if seeing the whole road that had brought her there change beneath her feet. George's polished face lost all color. Victor whispered, that document is contested. Sheriff Pike drew his revolver and laid it on the desk, not pointing it at anyone, just making its meaning plain. Then you may contest it from that chair, he said. Outside, the town waited for gossip. Inside, Emma Whitaker discovered she had not come west because she was unwanted. Someone had tried for years to keep her from coming home. Tell me in the comments, would you stay in a town where no one expected you, if the truth beneath it said the land had been waiting for your name? No one in Sheriff Pike's office spoke for several breaths. The old papers lay on the desk beneath the noon light, yellowed at the edges and heavy with the kind of truth that had waited a long time to be heard. Emma stared at her own name written in faded ink, and the room around her seemed to sway. Emma Whitaker, rightful heir. She did not feel like an heir. She felt like a tired woman in a brown dress with dust on her cuffs, a woman who had come west because a false letter promised a roof and honest work. A woman who had been looked over, talked around, and carried like a pawn by people with plans. Nathaniel's hand came lightly to the back of her chair, not touching her shoulder, not claiming her, just near enough that she could lean if she chose. She did not lean. But she was grateful he was there. Sheriff Pike lifted the first page with careful fingers. This appears to be a transfer of claim rights from Walter Bellamy to Edmund Whitcomb, held in trust. Victor Harrow sat stiff as a fence post. A document can appear to be many things before a court tests it. Hattie Bell gave a sharp laugh from near the stove. Funny how men love courts once the paper stops favoring them. Sheriff Pike ignored that, though one corner of his mouth twitched. Miss Whitaker, do you know the name Bellamy? No, Emma said, not beyond Mrs. Vale's father. Beatrice wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. My father never spoke of it, not to me, but he and Edmund Whitcomb knew each other when they were young. My mother once said they came west together before either of them married. Nathaniel's gaze moved from the document to George Vale, and the south water rights run through my grazing land. George's face had gone carefully blank. Through land that may soon belong to me. Not if the note was built on fraud, Sheriff Pike said. George turned toward him. Be careful, Sheriff. You are making legal assumptions beyond your office. I am making sure nobody leaves town with papers that may prove why two men brought an unsuspecting woman here with a forged marriage letter. Victor rose again. I did not bring her here. Emma looked at him. No, you followed once you learned I had come. Victor's eyes slid to the blue coat on the desk. I followed stolen estate property. The papers were addressed to me. They were held by Whitcomb. In trust, Nathaniel said. Victor's jaw tightened. You are a rancher, Mr. Cross. Do not pretend at law. Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice calm in a way that was more dangerous than anger. And you are a lawyer who traveled across 3 territories to frighten a woman over papers you claim are worthless until a court says otherwise. The sheriff nodded once. Fair point. George reached for his gloves. I am done with this foolishness. Sheriff Pike touched the revolver on his desk with one finger. Sit down, George. George looked at the gun, then the sheriff. You would hold me. I would ask you not to test how much. George sat. Emma watched him, and a strange feeling came over her. This man had money, position, a fine house, and a wife trained to fear his displeasure. Victor had law books, sharp words, and city polish. Both men had seemed large when they entered the room. Now they looked smaller, not harmless. Never that, but smaller. Truth did that sometimes. It did not always win at once, but it made liars shift in their chairs. Sheriff Pike spread the papers carefully. There were 3 letters, 1 draft, and 1 signed statement. He read the statement aloud in a slow, measured voice. I, Edmund Whitcomb, being of sound mind and clear memory, do swear that the South Water rights and Bellamy grazing claim were entrusted to me by Walter Bellamy, for the benefit of his bloodline should his daughters or their descendants ever require refuge. If no Bellamy heir claims it by the year 1879, the trust shall pass to the named child of Eliza Whitaker, born Eliza Bellamy, estranged daughter of Walter Bellamy. Beatrice gasped. Emma's hand went cold. Eliza Whitaker, Sheriff Pike said, looking up, that was your mother. Emma could hardly answer. Yes. Beatrice stood slowly. My father had another daughter. No, George snapped. Everyone turned to him. He had spoken too fast. Beatrice stared at her husband. You knew. George's mouth closed. Victor rubbed a hand across his chin, but even that practiced gesture could not hide his unease. You knew, Beatrice whispered again. All these years you knew my mother was not father's only wife. Beatrice, George said, old family sins do no good brought into the light. She was my sister. Half-sister, he said coldly. The cruelty of it landed hard. Emma thought of her mother, Eliza, who had spoken little of her girlhood, a woman with sad eyes and strong hands who kept one chipped blue cup on the shelf and cried the day it broke. Emma had been 7. Her mother had swept the pieces herself and said, some things from home do not survive the road, but one cup had. Somehow its mate had traveled a different path and ended up in Abigail Cross's hands. Emma pressed her fingertips to her lips. My mother had violets on her dishes, she whispered. I remember. Beatrice covered her mouth. Abigail loved that cup because father said my mother had once owned one like it. Hattie shook her head. Mercy me. Sheriff Pike turned the pages. The letters suggest Walter Bellamy sent money to Edmund Whitcomb in Cincinnati. He asked Whitcomb to find Eliza and her child. That would be you, Miss Whitaker. Emma's voice was thin, but he never found us. Victor spoke quietly, too quietly. Mr. Whitcomb was old, papers went missing, mail failed, it happens. No, Emma said. She looked at him. For the first time she did not see a polished attorney. She saw a man afraid of an envelope. Mr. Whitcomb found me, she said. He hired me. Victor said nothing. He knew who I was, did he not? The room waited. Victor's eyes hardened. He suspected. And you knew why. He was a dying man with regrets. Did Roger Whitcomb know? Victor's silence answered. Emma's voice trembled, but she kept going. That is why wages were refused. That is why I was watched. That is why you searched my aunt's house. You were not looking for estate papers. You were looking for proof that the land and water rights were mine." Victor's mouth twisted. "You were a seamstress with no education in land law. What would you have done with it?" Nathaniel stepped forward, but Emma lifted a hand and he stopped. She wanted to answer this herself. "I would have chosen," she said, "and that was what frightened you." Beatrice began to cry openly now, not dainty tears, real ones. She looked at Emma across the room like a person finding family in the middle of wreckage. "My father died thinking he lost her," she said. "He died thinking he lost your mother." Emma did not know what to do with that sorrow. It was too new, too large. George leaned back in his chair. "This touching reunion changes nothing. The Cross note is legal. Nathaniel borrowed against his ranch. Water rights or not, debt remains debt." Sheriff Pike looked down at the papers. "Unless you gave that loan knowing another claimant existed and concealed it to gain the land." "You cannot prove that." "Not yet." George's eyes sharpened. Not yet was a dangerous promise. Nathaniel spoke then. "Why did you want the South Water?" George looked at him with open contempt. "Because the railroad is surveying a spur line through this valley. Because water makes land valuable. Because you were sitting on wealth you were too grief-blind to see." The room went still. Railroad. Emma saw the final shape now. Cross Ranch was not just tired land under debt. It was the gate to water. Water meant cattle. Water meant settlement. Water meant railroad money. George Vale had used Nathaniel's grief, Beatrice's worry, and Emma's hidden name to move every piece closer to his own hand. Victor sighed. George. George realized too late that he had spoken too plainly. Sheriff Pike wrote it down. Hattie leaned toward Emma and whispered, "That is what happens when pride outruns sense." For some reason, that almost made Emma laugh. Sheriff Pike gathered the papers. "Here is what will happen. These documents stay in my safe until Judge Merriweather arrives next week for circuit court. Miss Whitaker will not be removed from Mercy Ridge. Mr. Harrow, you may wire your client if you like, but you will not trouble her without my presence. Mr. Vale, you will bring every paper relating to Nathaniel Cross's debt by sundown." George stood. "And if I refuse?" Sheriff Pike smiled without humor. "Then I start wondering what else is locked in your desk." George's face darkened, but he said nothing. Victor took his hat. "This is not over." Emma met his eyes. "No, but it is no longer only yours." Victor left first. George followed. The door shut behind them, and through the window Emma saw the watching town part as the two men stepped into the street. For once, Mercy Ridge did not whisper at Emma. It whispered at them. Beatrice turned toward her. "Emma, I do not know how to ask forgiveness for bringing you into this." "Then do not ask yet," Emma said softly. "Help make it right first." Beatrice nodded, tears slipping down her face. "I will." Sheriff Pike locked the papers in his safe. "Miss Whitaker, you have kin here whether you wanted them or not." Emma looked at Beatrice, then at Nathaniel, then toward the door where Daniel waited outside with Major clutched in both hands. Kin. The word felt strange. Nathaniel walked her out of the office into the afternoon sun. The town stood watching, but the faces looked different now, curious still, ashamed in places, wary in others. The schoolteacher gave Emma a small nod. The blacksmith removed his hat. Not acceptance. Not yet, but a crack in the wall. Daniel ran to Nathaniel first, then stopped and looked at Emma. "Are you going away?" Emma crouched, smoothing her skirt beneath her knees. "Not today." His shoulders relaxed. "Good," he said. "Major needs paint." Nathaniel looked down at his son, then at Emma. A quiet warmth passed through his tired face. On the wagon ride back to Cross Ranch, no one spoke for a long while. The sun dropped low, turning the grass gold. Emma held the teacup in her lap, thumb resting over the tiny blue initials, half-sister, heir, false bride, hired woman. None of the names fit cleanly. At the ranch, Daniel ran ahead to put Major on the windowsill. Nathaniel carried the basket inside while Emma stood near the porch, looking at the land with new eyes. The south meadow rolled toward the creek, where cottonwoods marked the water line in silver and green. The windmill groaned. The fence leaned, the house waited. Nathaniel came to stand beside her. "This land may be yours," he said, "some part of it. Enough to change things." "Yes." He nodded, but sadness touched his eyes. Emma understood. If the claim was hers, then the ranch beneath his grief, his labor, his wife's memory, and his son's childhood might no longer be his in the same way. The truth that freed her might cost him. "I did not come to take your home," she said. "I know. But the papers say what they say." "They do." The evening wind lifted a loose strand of her hair. Nathaniel looked as if he wanted to brush it back, but he did not. That restraint hurt more tenderly than touch. "Emma," he said, voice rough, "when this is settled, you will have choices. Better ones than a tired ranch, and a man with more sorrow than savings." She looked at him. There it was, the door opening before she had asked to leave. "You are already sending me away." His eyes closed briefly. "No, I am trying not to hold you because I need you." She turned toward the meadow so he would not see how deeply that reached. Need had brought her west in a lie, but kindness had kept her there. "I have been needed before," she said. "For sewing, for accounts, for quiet obedience, for blame. It is not need that frightens me, Nathaniel." "What does?" She looked back at him. "Not being wanted once I am no longer useful." His face changed. Slowly he removed his hat, the same way he had at the livery on the day she arrived, respectful, bare before the truth. "I want you at my table," he said. "I want your voice in this house. I want Daniel asking you about paint and horses because he trusts you to answer plain. I want to look across the yard and see you there. That is the truth, and it scares me near senseless." Emma's breath caught. He did not step closer. He did not take her hand. He only stood in the falling light, offering no false promise, no stolen name, no rushed marriage, no claim she had not freely given. Behind them, through the window, Daniel placed the repaired wooden horse beside Abigail's blue shawl. Emma looked at Nathaniel Cross and felt something inside her turn toward him like a flower toward sun. "I am scared too," she whispered. For a moment that was enough. Then a gunshot cracked from the direction of the barn. Nathaniel shoved Emma behind him and reached for his rifle. A horse screamed in terror. Daniel cried out from inside the house. And from the shadow beyond the corral, a riderless black horse burst into the yard, dragging a broken rein behind it like a warning. The riderless black horse crashed through the yard with its eyes rolling white. Nathaniel moved before Emma could breathe. He shoved the house door open and called, "Daniel, stay inside." The boy's frightened face appeared at the window, one hand pressed to the glass, Major Forgotten on the sill beside him. Emma ran to the porch. "Nathaniel." He had already taken the rifle from its pegs and was crossing the yard toward the corral. The black horse skidded near the trough, sides heaving, foam flecking its bit. The broken rein dragged behind it, torn clean through, and the saddle was twisted halfway under its belly. Emma knew that horse. Victor Harrow had ridden into town on it. Another shot cracked from beyond the barn. This one struck the windmill blade with a sharp clang. The bent metal spun once, shrieking against the night. Nathaniel dropped low behind the water trough. "Get down." Emma fell behind the porch rail as splinters jumped from the step beside her hand. Daniel cried out inside. Fear hit her hard, but it did not scatter her thoughts. Not this time. She crawled through the doorway, keeping low, and barred it behind her. Daniel stood in the middle of the room, shaking. "Come here," she whispered. He ran to her at once. She pulled him down beside the hearth, away from the window, and wrapped one arm around his shoulders. "Where is Pa?" "Outside. He knows this yard better than anyone." "Is he going to die?" The question came out small and raw. Emma cupped his face with her free hand. "Listen to me, Daniel Cross. Your father is careful and he is brave, and we are going to help him by doing exactly what he told us. We stay low. We stay quiet." Daniel nodded, tears standing in his eyes. Outside, Nathaniel's voice cut through the dark. Show yourself." No answer came, only the restless snort of Victor's horse and the soft hiss of wind through grass. Then a voice called from behind the barn, "Cross, I need help." Emma froze. His voice sounded strained, almost broken. Nathaniel did not move from cover. "Walk out with your hands raised." "I cannot walk." A silence followed. Emma knew what Victor was doing. Maybe he truly was hurt, maybe not. Men like him could turn pain into a hook and kindness into a rope. Nathaniel knew it too. "Who shot?" He called. Victor coughed. "George." Emma's breath caught. Inside the house, Daniel whimpered, "Mr. Vale." Emma held him tighter. From the yard came the slow sound of Nathaniel's shifting position. "Nathaniel," Emma whispered, though he could not hear. Victor called again. "He has gone toward the creek. He means to burn the barn and blame me if he can." The back window flashed orange, not fire, a lantern. Then a dark shape moved near the hay shed. Nathaniel fired once. The shot slammed through the night. A man cursed. Hooves pounded beyond the fence, then faded toward the lower pasture. Nathaniel rose and ran for the barn. Emma could not sit still. She looked at Daniel. "Stay by the hearth. Do not open this door unless you hear my voice or your father's." "Miss Emma." "I will be close." She took the heavy iron poker from beside the fireplace and slipped out the back door. The cold hit her face. Smoke already threaded the air, thin but sharp. Not the barn, the hay shed. A lantern had been thrown against the side and flames licked up dry boards. Nathaniel was there, beating at the fire with a wet horse blanket. Emma ran to the water barrel, plunged a bucket in, and hauled it with both hands, though it pulled hard at her arms. "Emma, get back." "No." She threw water on the low flames. Steam burst up. Nathaniel cursed under his breath, but he did not waste more words. Together they fought it, bucket after bucket, blanket after blanket. Sparks flew into Emma's hair and singed the edge of her sleeve. Her lungs burned. Nathaniel's face was blackened with smoke, his eyes fierce in the red light. At last the flames shrank, then died, leaving charred boards and a smell that turned Emma's stomach. Victor groaned from the shadow near the barn. Nathaniel turned the rifle toward him. "Come out." Victor crawled into the lantern light. For once, his suit was not clean. Mud streaked one sleeve. Blood darkened the side of his coat near the ribs, but not enough to mean death. His hat was gone, and his polished hair hung loose over his forehead. Without his careful clothing in order, he looked younger and meaner. Emma tightened her grip on the poker. Victor saw her. A bitter smile touched his mouth. There she is, the lost heiress with a stove tool. Nathaniel stepped close enough that Victor stopped smiling. "What happened?" Victor pressed a hand to his side. "George and I disagreed." "About what?" "About whether dead men tell tales." A sound came from the house. Daniel crying for his father. Nathaniel's face twisted with worry, but he stayed where he was. Emma called, "Daniel, stay inside. We are safe." His sob quieted, though not fully. Nathaniel looked back at Victor. "Speak." Victor laughed once, then winced. "George has the Bellamy letters in his office safe. He planned to destroy them tonight." I told him that was foolish. Original papers are worth more than ashes if used properly. "You meant blackmail," Emma said. "I meant leverage." "And he shot you." Victor's eyes hardened. "He hates sharing profit." Nathaniel crouched, keeping the rifle ready. "Why did you follow Emma?" "Because Roger Whitcomb learned what his uncle had done. The old man meant to send the papers to a judge, but died before he could. We searched the house. The servant had vanished. We assumed she carried them." "I carried what was given to me," Emma said. Victor looked at her. For the first time his face held something like reluctant respect. "Yes, and you carried them farther than we expected." Nathaniel's voice was cold. "Who stole her coat?" Victor said nothing. Emma took one step closer. "Who?" "A depot thief in St. Louis, paid $5. Victor swallowed, pain shining on his forehead. "He was meant to bring it to me. Instead, he lost it in freight confusion like an idiot. A strange laugh nearly rose in Emma's chest. All that fear, all that running, and fate had hidden the truth in a storage crate because a thief misplaced a stolen coat. Nathaniel looked toward the lower pasture, where darkness swallowed the road to town. George will destroy the letters. Likely, Victor said. Can he? He has to reach them first. Emma's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? Victor shifted, wincing. I took the safe key. From inside his muddy vest, he pulled a small brass key on a ring and held it up. Nathaniel took it. Why help us? Emma asked. Victor smiled faintly. Because George shot me. My loyalty has always been expensive, Miss Whitaker, but not immortal. Emma felt no gratitude, but truth sometimes came from rotten doors if pushed hard enough. Nathaniel stood. We ride. No, Emma said, we ride. He turned to her. Emma. Those letters may prove my mother's name. They may save your ranch. They may free Beatrice from a man who has used her fear for years. I am not waiting by the hearth while men decide whether I am safe enough to know my own life. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, not happily, but with trust. He dragged Victor to the porch and bound his hands with a length of rope, not cruelly but firmly. Emma brought clean cloth and pressed it against Victor's wound, while Nathaniel tied him to the porch post where he could be seen from the road. Victor looked at her hands. You would tend me. I would rather not, Emma said, but I will not let a man bleed in front of a child if I can help it. For once Victor had no clever answer. Nathaniel saddled Juniper and the spare mare with swift, hard movements. Emma went inside to Daniel. The boy clung to her skirt. Do not go. She knelt. I have to help your father. Everyone leaves when they say that. The words broke something open in the room. Nathaniel had come to the doorway and heard them. His face looked stricken. He crossed to his son and knelt. Danny, look at me. Daniel shook his head, crying now. Nathaniel took the blue shawl from the rocking chair and wrapped it around the boy's shoulders. This was your mama's, he said, voice rough. I kept it on the porch because I did not know where else to put my missing of her, but missing her is not the same as leaving you. Daniel looked up. Nathaniel pressed a kiss to his son's hair. I am coming back. You promise? I promise. Daniel turned to Emma. You too. Emma's throat tightened. No one had asked her to come back in a long time. I promise, she said. Hattie Bell arrived in a wagon just as Nathaniel and Emma mounted. She had seen smoke from town and come with Sheriff Pike's deputy beside her. Hattie took in Victor tied to the porch, Daniel wrapped in Abigail's shawl, and Emma sitting straight on the mare. Well, she said, I miss one quiet supper and the whole valley loses its manners. Nathaniel pointed toward Victor. Watch him. George is riding for town to burn evidence. Hattie's eyes sharpened. Then go. Daniel stood on the porch between Hattie and the deputy. The blue shawl fluttered around his small shoulders. Emma looked at him, then at Nathaniel. The moon had risen above the ridge. Its light silvered his face and caught in the dust on his coat. He looked afraid, not of bullets or fire, but of all he might lose if the night went wrong. He reached across the space between their horses and took Emma's hand. Just once. His fingers wrapped around hers, strong and trembling. Then he let go. They rode hard toward Mercy Ridge. The town lights glimmered ahead like scattered embers. Somewhere among them, George Vale carried years of lies toward a flame. Behind Emma lay a child waiting on a porch, a wounded enemy tied under guard, and a ranch that had begun to feel like a place her heart might choose. Ahead lay the letters, the final proof, and perhaps the answer to why a false bride had been brought west to save a home that might have been hers all along. The ride to Mercy Ridge felt shorter than it had any right to be. The night wind tore at Emma's shawl and pressed cold tears from the corners of her eyes. The mare beneath her stretched into the dark with steady courage, following Juniper's pounding stride down the road. Ahead, Nathaniel rode low in the saddle, his coat flying behind him, the brass key clenched in one hand like a promise. No words passed between them. The valley itself seemed to hold its breath. Mercy Ridge appeared under the moon, all black roofs and dim windows. Only a few lamps still burned. One glowed at the sheriff's office. Another shone behind the upstairs curtains of the Vale House, a square, proud building at the far end of town with a painted fence and trimmed hedges that looked foolish beneath so much wild sky. Smoke rose from behind it. Nathaniel saw it too. He pointed. There. They rode past the church, past the mercantile, past the silent dress shop where the green curtains hung closed. A dog barked. A curtain lifted. Somewhere a man shouted, "Fire!" By the time they reached the Vale House, the back shed was already burning. Orange light licked the dark, reaching for the stacked crates beside it. George Vale stood near the open shed door with a leather satchel in one hand and a lantern in the other. His polished coat was streaked with soot. His hat was gone. He turned at the sound of horses. For one moment his face showed the truth of him plainly. Not dignity, not confidence, panic. Nathaniel swung down first. "Put the satchel down." George backed away. "This is private property." Emma dismounted beside Nathaniel, her legs trembling from the hard ride. "Not if that satchel holds what belongs to me." George looked at her with open hatred. "You have no idea what belongs to you." "Then let the judge tell me." "The judge?" He gave a bitter laugh. "Do you think judges are saints? Do you think law is a hymn sung by honest men? Law belongs to whoever reaches the courthouse first with the cleanest story." Nathaniel raised the rifle. "You are not reaching anywhere." The back door of the Vale House opened. Beatrice appeared in her nightdress and wrapper, hair falling loose around her shoulders. She must have followed with Hattie's wagon or come by some back way sooner than they knew. Her face was pale in the firelight, but she did not look weak anymore. "George," she said. He turned. "Go inside." "No." "Beatrice." She stepped down into the yard. "No." The word was simple, but it changed her whole body. She stood taller after saying it, as if she had unlocked some hidden bone in herself. George's grip tightened on the satchel. "You will regret humiliating me." "I have regretted obeying you for years." The shed roof cracked. Sparks flew upward into the night. Doors opened along the street. Men came running with buckets. Sheriff Pike arrived at a hard trot with a deputy behind him. Hattie Bell's wagon rattled into view moments later, Daniel tucked safely beside her on the bench, wrapped in Abigail's blue shawl. Nathaniel looked sharply toward his son. Hattie called, "He would have jumped from the wagon if I left him behind, so do not waste breath scolding me." Daniel's eyes found his father, then Emma. He stayed where he was, but his small hands clutched the shawl tight. Sheriff Pike took in George, the burning shed, the satchel, and Nathaniel's rifle. "George Vale," he said, "set that down." George looked around. The town was waking now. Faces gathered in the glow. The same people who had whispered over Emma were watching George with fear and fascination. He lifted his chin. "You all think me the villain because I understood value before the rest of you did." "No," Emma said. "We think you are the villain because you used grief as a banknote." The words landed in the yard. Nathaniel lowered the rifle slightly, but his eyes stayed fixed on George. George laughed, but it broke near the end. That ranch would have rotted under him. A widower talking to a dead woman's piano. A boy growing wild. Land sitting over water while the railroad looked for a path. "I saw what could be built." "You saw what could be taken," Beatrice said. George turned on her. "Your father hid wealth from us, from you. He meant to give it to a runaway daughter and her child, while you, the loyal daughter, received scraps." Beatrice's eyes filled, but her voice held. "My father's wrongs do not excuse yours." Emma felt those words touch something deep in her own heart. Her mother had been hidden. Beatrice had been lied to. Abigail had died never knowing her husband's land carried her half-sister's claim. Daniel had grown under a sorrow none of the adults understood. Nathaniel had nearly lost everything because George saw mourning as weakness. So much pain had begun before Emma ever stepped off that train. But tonight it would not be passed on quietly. Sheriff Pike stepped closer. Hand over the satchel. George looked at Victor's black horse tied near the fence, then at the narrow alley beyond the shed. His eyes chose. Nathaniel moved an instant before he ran. George bolted toward the alley. Nathaniel lunged after him, but Emma saw what neither man saw. The burning shed wall bowed outward, glowing at the seams. "Nathaniel!" she cried. He stopped. The wall collapsed. Fire and timber crashed between Nathaniel and George, throwing sparks high. George stumbled back with a shout, trapped between the fallen boards and the sheriff's deputy coming around the other side. The satchel flew from his hand and landed near Emma's feet. She snatched it up and backed away from the heat. George's face twisted. "Give that here." Sheriff Pike caught him by the arm. George fought once, then stopped when the deputy drew his revolver. "It is over," Beatrice said. George looked at his wife, breathing hard, soot on his face and fury in his eyes. "You are nothing without me." Beatrice flinched. Then Daniel's small voice came from the wagon. "That ain't true." Everyone turned. Daniel climbed down despite Hattie's protest and walked to Beatrice. The blue shawl dragged behind him in the dust. He looked up at his aunt. "You made Mama's dresses," he said, "and you bring peppermint when I am sad, and you know how to make Pa listen even when he is stubborn." He swallowed. "You are not nothing." Beatrice broke. She knelt and pulled him into her arms, crying into his hair. Daniel let her hold him. Nathaniel stood watching, his face tight with feeling. Emma opened the satchel with shaking hands. Inside were letters tied with blue ribbon, a ledger book, the original loan note for Cross Ranch, and a folded map marked in George Vale's hand. The map showed the creek, the south meadow, the proposed railroad spur, and a bold circle around the water rights. Sheriff Pike took the satchel carefully. "This will do." George sagged between the sheriff and deputy, all his polish gone. Victor Harrow's testimony, the forged letter, the hidden documents, the attempted burning, and George's own ledger would tell the rest. Justice would not be swift as lightning, but it had finally found a trail. As neighbors formed a bucket line for the last flames, Emma stood apart, breathing smoke and cold air. Her dress was scorched at one sleeve. Her hair had fallen loose. Her hands were blackened from the satchel. Nathaniel came to her. "Are you hurt?" "No." His eyes searched her face as if her answer alone was not enough. "Emma." She looked down at the ground. "You should go to Daniel." "I did. Hattie has him." "Then Beatrice." "She is with him too." "Nathaniel." He stepped closer. "I thought that wall would fall on me." Her breath caught. "So did I." "For 1 second," he said, voice rough. "I thought I would leave Daniel fatherless and leave you thinking you had brought ruin to my door." Emma shook her head. "No." "Yes, that is what frightened me most. Not dying. Leaving the people I love with the wrong story." "The people I love." Emma went still. Nathaniel took off his hat. His hair was damp with sweat, his face streaked with soot, his eyes bare under the moon and firelight. "I loved Abigail," he said. "I will always honor her. For years I thought that meant keeping my heart buried beside her. Then you stepped off that train with dust on your dress and courage in your hands, and somehow my house began breathing again." Emma's eyes filled. "I did not write that letter," he said, "but I thank God you answered it." The words trembled between them. He did not reach for her, still giving her choice, still waiting at the edge of what she might freely give. Emma looked across the yard. Daniel sat on the wagon with Abigail's shawl around his shoulders. Beatrice stood near him, weeping quietly while Hattie spoke to her in a firm, gentle way. Sheriff Pike led George toward the jail. The townspeople whispered, but no longer with the same hunger. Some looked ashamed. Some looked thoughtful. Some simply watched a woman who had arrived as gossip become the center of a truth too large to ignore. Emma turned back to Nathaniel. "I came here because a lie promised me respect," she said. "But you gave it without knowing whether I would stay. You gave me work without making me small. You gave me truth even when it cost you. You gave me a place at your table before you knew this land might carry my name." He swallowed. "Emma." "If I leave now," she said, "it will not be because I was sent away. And if I stay, it will not be because I have nowhere else to go." His eyes shone. She stepped closer and took his hand. "I choose to stay," she whispered. "Not as a false bride, not as a debt paid, not as a woman trapped by need. I choose you, Nathaniel Cross. I choose Daniel. I choose this hard land and that lonely house and the piano under its cloth. I choose whatever we can build honestly." For a moment he could not speak. Then he bowed his head over their joined hands. "I love you," he said, low and broken. Emma lifted her free hand to his soot-streaked cheek. "I love you too." Nathaniel closed his eyes at her touch, as if those words had crossed a desert to reach him. When he opened them, he leaned close, slow enough for her to turn away. She did not. Their first kiss was gentle, warm despite the cold, and filled with all the things they had not said on the road, in the kitchen, beside the broken horse, under the watching eyes of town. It was not a claim. It was a vow beginning to take shape. By Christmas, Judge Merriweather confirmed the papers. Emma held the Bellamy water rights through her mother's line, and George Vale's loan was set aside after his fraud came to light. Victor Harrow avoided prison by testifying fully against Roger Whitcomb and George, though Mercy Ridge never again mistook clean gloves for clean hands. Beatrice kept her dress shop and gave Emma the blue trunk, empty now except for one small thing she had saved: the matching violet saucer to Abigail's cracked teacup. The wedding came in spring, not rushed, not forced, not arranged by anyone's fear. Emma wore a simple cream dress she and Beatrice sewed together in careful peace. Daniel carried the rings in the hollow back of Major, whose repaired leg had been painted gold because, as Daniel declared, standing deserves some shine. Hattie cried and denied it. Sheriff Pike stood witness. The townspeople filled the church, quieter and kinder than before. Nathaniel waited at the front with his hat in his hands. When Emma walked toward him, she did not feel like a woman bought by a letter. She felt like a woman coming home by choice. That evening at Cross Ranch, Nathaniel pulled the cloth from Abigail's piano. Emma set the cracked violet teacup and its matching saucer on the shelf nearby. Beatrice played the song Abigail used to sing, and Daniel, shy at first, joined in with the words he remembered. Outside, the lantern on the porch burned bright against the blue mountain dusk. It no longer looked like a light left for the dead. It looked like a light kept for anyone still finding their way home. If you believe love can grow from truth, patience, and one brave choice to stay, don't forget to like this story and subscribe for more heartfelt frontier romances. And in the years that followed, when people asked Emma Cross how she came to Mercy Ridge, she would smile at Nathaniel across their busy table and say, "I arrived because of a letter that lied, but I stayed because of a man who never did."